except he agrees on basically nothing that I believe and presents himself as a contrarian to almost every single thing I do believe.
Yes, yes. When I go to, when I'm browsing books or whatever, and I'm trying to figure out like, well, what am I going to read now? What am I going to study? I'm trying to think of like, okay, what would Hassan think? And then who would author an opinion to be as opposite Hassan's as possible?
Sneako and Fuentes. And so I thought that was funny because obviously Yitzhak Shamir, I'm sure you know all this, Yitzhak Shamir and the Lehi party tried to get an alliance with Nazi Germany.
Do you think that Arab states should start issuing passports and citizenships to Palestinians living at their borders instead of like their perpetual unending refugee problem?
No, I mean, come on. You know that's ridiculous. You know that the reason, I mean, the big reason that Egypt and like other Arab countries haven't allowed refugees in is because if you start letting refugees in, well, all of a sudden the Palestinian state will cease to exist.
Exactly.
Right?
So hold on, wait, so careful.
You're so washed up and out of touch, dude. I used to really like watching you, but you're so insufferable now and out of touch. It's pretty sad, actually. Is this guy trying to do a bait at like fucking... I just wanted to let you know that Bro.
Wait. This is like, what the fuck am I thinking of? There's like some, is it a lefty news org that does these videos where it's just like a ton of like B-roll and then the words appear on the front and like this, did anybody know what I'm talking about? Is it, I don't think it's Vox. Is it Vox that does the shorts? Oh, now this, that's what I'm thinking of. Now this, yeah. Like one of these things.
To invest in American dollar TV screen play.
Oh no, except without the host.
Donald Trump met with...
Oh no, they're like one of these. Maybe one of these.
I think you're...
No.
Crockett didn't.
God damn it. You know what I'm talking about. Like one of these. There we go.
The amount of my brain that is no longer usable, it's remarkable.
Oh, because she spent so much time in Game of Thrones.
I think a lot of people failed to understand the point I was making during Russia's unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine and immediately moved away.
To be clear, I don't know what he's about to say, but the point was America bad, don't trust America. America fake war so that America military industrial complex imperialism, America bad. Western imperialism, NATO, America bad because imperialism and military industrial Lockheed, America bad. That was the reason why he didn't trust the initial calls. That had nothing to do with an actual analysis of what was going on. There were people on both sides of that some were right, some were wrong. I think I don't think I stick that as a strong position, but even I didn't think that Russia's going to be, I admittedly didn't know much about it, but some people thought there was good reason for them to. Some people said there wasn't. Like, yeah, I am swagged the fuck out. Yeah. I know you're jealous. You can't all have the cappuccino shirts. They call me the drip lord. They do.
And we're very upset. And then that resentment festered in all of the other communities. Like, he was doing fucking top of the hour ad break debates and shit, you know what I mean? And then October 7 was another moment of like, even if they were like, let me give this guy another shot. I used to be a fan and now I'm a hate watcher. There are a lot of people like that though. There are, and they just like, they keep watching every day, but they just like fucking hate. And I don't understand how. I really want to know.
I hate progressives. They don't have morals. They have buzzwords. The ones that aren't two-faced are cowards. In other words, they're useless. They would help the wolves slaughter the lambs if they cried wolf first. Okay, sure, but I mean, like, everybody likes their buzzwords, to be fair.
Like, I genuinely try to understand it because, I mean, I guess I was watching, I just think you're in a deep echo chamber, brother. I was watching LSF clips and you're just so ... lost. Yeah, the hot side of hate complex is real. No, I get why there's a hate complex out there. It's a way to make money for a lot of people who are just like, who want to.
Why can't he ever accept that some people just might not like his political views? Like, there are people that used to be fans of mine and then they left during Israel-Palestine. Like, I understand why. Like, it happens. I think you're dumb for it, obviously. But I don't think it's always, well, I was going to say, I don't think it's just people, like, trying to make money off of hating me. But I guess, actually, there are a lot of people that just trying to make money off of hating me. So I guess I see why he thinks that. But like people can leave because they just disagree with your shit now, right? It happens, you know?
You're like one of the biggest haters out there, dude. What? You're also personally talking about how you agree with another incredibly stubborn person. I assume you mean Divorcelli, which is pretty fucking hilarious, considering if you agree with me on a lot of things, but you hate how stubborn I am and how I won't let certain things go.
Well, that's Divorcelli's biggest trait.
It would be very odd for you to also simultaneously say you agree with that other person who is also incredibly stubborn. Except he agrees on basically nothing that I believe and presents himself as a contrarian to almost every single thing I do believe.
Yes. When I go to, when I'm browsing books or whatever, and I'm trying to figure out like, well, what am I going to read now? What am I going to study? I'm trying to think of like, okay, what would Hassan think? And then who would author an opinion to be as opposite Hassan's as possible? That is my thought process. Like I have to be, whatever side Hassan is on, I need to be on the opposite side here.
So you can just personally say that you agree with him and not me instead of how stubborn I am. Question for Hassan. Before October 7, were there people who left after the Ukraine war?
Sorry, my mic glitched for a second. It sounded like I said Hassan for a second there, but it was Hassan. There is sometimes this shit ass fucking mic glitches and it cuts out some of my words. That's why it sounds like there's a misspeak sometimes, or a real voice. So
Question for Hassan. Before October 7, were there people who left after the Ukraine war began? Correct? Yes. Every single instance where like people have left, and that happens for normal reasons. Obviously, people cycle in and out.
Has Destiny taken a victory lap about all the latest Keffel's videos about her lies? Bro, it's not a victory lap for me. It's like a thumbs up from the grave. Fuck you. I got destroyed on that shit. I lost my Twitch account. I don't feel good that people are finally jumping on. I don't want people to even get credit for it. It's bullshit.
But in every single instance, it's usually...
Okay, this guy was on Twitter yesterday. Wow, hi, what's up?
Hello.
How's it going? You were on the Twitters yesterday.
I was. Wait, how do I do this? This is so confusing. Okay, so I've never been on Discord before. Do I join voice?
No, we can just chat. This is fine.
This chat like this? Okay, awesome. And will I be able to see you?
Well, do you want to like make a video or something?
Yeah, well, I would. Oh, wait, I can see you now.
Oh, no, you can't. Hold on, wait. I didn't know you were on it. 1 second. There you go.
Okay, awesome. It's just easier when, you know, like when you can see the face of the person you're talking to.
Okay. Well, how's it going? What's up? What are we chatting about?
I'm good. So actually, what was the quote tweet? I can pull it up right now. It was Hitler and al-Husseini, talking to each other in a meeting, in a correspondence. And I think you quote tweeted it and said,
Sneako and Fuentes.
Sneako and Fuentes. And so I thought that was funny because obviously Yitzhak Shamir, I'm sure you know all this, Yitzhak Shamir and the Lehi party tried to get an alliance with Nazi Germany in the 30s and 40s. It ended up not working, obviously, but obviously that happened. So like it was a little strange to see that kind of like, oh, this is Sneako and Fuentes when they're literal, they're like fascists in Israel right now who
do you think? First of all, when you say the Lehi were trying to get an alliance with the Nazis in the 30s and 40s, the S's there are doing a lot of work on that. I think the Lehi, I think they might have broken off from the Irgun over the trying to form an alliance with Nazi Germany. But I think the main thrust of this was in 41 and 42, when they were because they thought that Germany was going to win the war, and because they felt like the British had abandoned them in Palestine. The Lehi, which was some 300 members strong, I think, tried to align themselves, or they at least made overtures towards Germany because they thought they were going to be on the winning side. But I mean, Husseini wanted to be friends with like the Nazis and stuff because they wanted to push like all of the Israelis, or I guess it would just been the Jews, like out of that region and possibly kill them all. But I mean, I don't know what the point of the comparison is.
Well, the point of the point of the comparison was that it was a tweet, and I was trying to point out like what I saw as a contradiction. But when you say like al-Husseini was trying to just kill all the Jews and all this kind of stuff, and also that the agreement with Nazi Germany was political. Well, it's true, obviously, that they were trying to use Nazi Germany as a way of creating a new state, and Netanyahu, is quoted as saying, well, the Nazi Germany, all they wanted to do was expel the Jews. Al-Husseini wanted to kill all of them. which is obviously a little rich to assert that like that Al Husseini is worse than Hitler in some way.
Yeah, I'm not going to co-sign any statements Netanyahu's made. There's been a lot of retarded statements that really everybody makes about the Holocaust. I guess if you live in Israel, your opinions about the Holocaust just become deranged, whether you're an Israeli or a Palestinian. But
well, yeah, and like at some point I looked up a bunch of Netanyahu, like worse Netanyahu quotes, just to see what I could find. And yeah, you're right. There are a lot of crazy things that he said.
I could be wrong, but I want to say, didn't Netanyahu say, and I know this is a common, very far right Zionist talking point, that Husseini was the one that gave Hitler the idea for the Holocaust? I don't know if Netanyahu said that or somebody else, but like that is like a thought that has existed that I've seen before. Yeah.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because that whole thing was basically like a post-war evidence given by these two Jewish people who were like involved in rescue attempts. And so afterwards, one of them, I think his name was Dieter Washezny, he gave an interview and he said that's actually what we said like wasn't actually true. And there's actually no evidence that during Husseini's and Hitler's correspondence that Husseini was like, this is what we need to do. This is the final solution. This is everything. Like, we need to kill all the Jews. All of that came from a testimony from like two people, one of them whom like afterwards said, no, that didn't actually happen. And so, but look, you can't reasonably say that Al Husseini wasn't a massive anti-Semite. That's not really the point. The point is that if you're going to say that, well, the Lehi party, they wanted to have an alliance with Nazi Germany. One, because they felt like, well, obviously, you know what the white papers are?
Yeah. Well, which ones? But
yeah, so they thought that Britain was trying to oppress the Jewish people, which is ironic, because how can you oppress people by just not letting more other people in, right? The felt oppression was that they had been promised basically the ability to set up a state there, and then Britain started to cap the immigration, which was severely hampering their ability to do that, right? And then also, just as a thing, you keep describing them as the Lehi party. To be clear, the Lehi were like self-described terrorists, and again, I'm pretty sure in this period they were like 300 strong, and I think a lot of these guys ended up even getting prosecuted by the Yishuv, where they got in trouble because they were doing fucking terrorist attacks. So you're right, they did, but then as well, like one of the most prominent figures in the Lehi party ended up becoming an Israeli prime minister, Yitzhak Shamir.
We'd be careful, because like one of the like prominent members of the Irgun ended up becoming a prime minister, Menachem Begin, and he's the one that signed peace with Egypt. So I mean, like, yeah, there are definitely radicals that came out of that period and did things. Yeah.
Okay, so the peace with Egypt is obviously a different thing, because peace with Egypt was part of. Are you talking about
a major disagreement between my?
Am I talking about what? Sorry, say that again.
Peace treaty with Egypt in 1979.
Yeah.
Because so we don't need to get into that, but that a lot of Egyptians feel like that wasn't done in good faith, and that was just like a justification for the invasion of Lebanon. That's not really relevant to this conversation.
Sure.
It's obviously true that there were multiple prime ministers. You could argue, including Netanyahu, but there are multiple prime ministers before Netanyahu who were part of these militant
super radical militant terrorists,
radical groups. And then I guess you could say like, well, Yitzhak Shamir, he wasn't even the most radical Israeli prime minister. But that's not really the point that I would try and make. The point that I try and make is that the Lehi were obviously a radical. You're right. They self-described themselves as terrorists. They believed in not just Arab inferiority to Jewish people, but also like Arab Jewish inferiority. So that's like. So they were not only racist, but they're also, they're anti-Semitic, which is, and then people from that, and then you also say that they were 300 strong and that they disintegrated. They were, held, they were what would you say? They were put in court, or they.
I think some were prosecuted, and then I think eventually, once the IDF was formed, the Haganah, the Lehi, they were all like disbanded and like rolled into the military proper, right?
Right. Well, I would actually say that's problematic, in that the Lehi, the Haganah, these all became part of the IDF. And you hear a lot of people in the U.S., a lot of like progressives, and I don't know exactly how you feel about this, but I'm sure you probably disagree. Say, oh, the police is like the KKK, and the police is just like racist and institutional racism and all this stuff. And regardless of what you think of that, the argument was that the police came from like slave patrolling missions or whatever, the slave patrol. In Israel, the argument is actually a lot stronger because, well, for one, it's more recent, but also like the ideology is a lot more prevalent in Israel. But the IDF, a lot of what the IDF came from was these super militant terrorists, and also this is really important. They were fascist organizations.
Well, I don't
so,
think
like,
the fascist thing doesn't fit at all. But when you say like super militant, like the Haganah was like dwarfed the size of the Lehi and the Irgun, like several times over combined. So I think that the primary fighting force wasn't as radical as the Lehi and the Irgun. But that being said, I mean, you have to keep in mind that it's easy from the West to say like, oh wow, like you guys should act like this or that, and you shouldn't be defined or come from these, particular areas, of like terrorism or aggression or whatever. You should disband all those people.
Right.
But this is like a super ultra hostile region where like they're under attack constantly. So it's understandable that there are going to be people the same way that in Ukraine, people like Bandera, and, he might have fancied himself an allegiance to the Nazi party at points, right? Probably the same in the Middle East, where you're going to have people on both sides that are insanely radical, right? Like Arafat started as a terrorist, the Irgun and the Lehi, and a lot of Israeli prime ministers had backgrounds in military and terrorist activities. So I mean, like that's pretty understandable, right?
That's all true. And Arafat. I mean, we can just talk about Arafat and whether he's a terrorist or whether he's a freedom fighter, all this kind of stuff. I do want to ask you though.
Well, hold on, real quick, wait. You do agree though? Like Arafat engaged in terrorism.
Yeah, he did engage in terror. I mean,
whether his cause was noble or not, I mean, we argue about it, but absolutely.
There's this whole thing. Like, is it even terrorism if you're fighting for freedom? If you're a resistance fighter, like, what are the boundaries? I obviously say like, if you kill civilians, that's obviously totally unjustified.
Like hijacking airplanes and like I think stuff like that.
They did hijack airplanes, but I mean, obviously, this in 1954, Israel also hijacked airplanes and they took Syrian civilians hostage.
In 54, which what was the name of this thing?
You could just look at 1954 Israeli hijacking, because Syria had Israeli soldiers hostage, and so they took Syrian civilians hostage, and obviously that's illegal under international law and all that kind of stuff. But but my whole point is, if you're going to say, well, these are extremist radical groups, but there is because there's a lot of fighting going on, would you make that same excuse for like Hamas?
I mean, to some extent, yeah. I mean, I said as much. Like, I mean, like the status quo in Israel-Palestine is completely untenable. If the Gaza invasion finishes and Hamas is removed and Israel doesn't make any moves, or the Palestinians towards like some kind of permanent peace arrangement, it's going to happen again, right? It happened in 2008, 2014, 2018, 2023. Right. Like, it's going to happen again if nothing gets solved. So, yeah, I mean, like, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think you can simultaneously like understand like a cause for war on one side, but then still say that like, but it's still like, this is like terrorism. Like, you understand why people do things, right? I understand like why abused wives murder their husbands, but it's probably not good to murder your husband. It's not good.
Wait, so you're actually, I was under the impression that you're this super pro-Israel, like kind of.
Yeah, because I argue against deranged Palestinians all day because pro-Palestinians are crazy. But I've argued against like super pro-Zionists too. I just don't see as many of them online. There's not as many of them to fight with, but.
So you'd say that there is a justification. I mean, obviously you're not justifying, these terrorist attacks, but you would say that there is some justification for Hamas's actions over the past 20 years?
When you say justification, there's like a normative loading to that. Like, is it morally okay? Like, it's understandable.
Right. I'm not talking about epistemic justification or like.
Yeah. When I look at somebody like Hamas, I see that like radical Islam kind of like took roots in areas, especially where people were losing faith or never had faith in the Palestinian Authority. And as these groups pop up and they gain more and more influence and power, and the Palestinian Authority continues to look weaker and weaker, whether that's because Israel is not like making any concessions during Oslo, or whether that's because a lot of people said the PA local leadership was corrupt, or whether it was because Arafat was more concerned with his political advantages and gains rather than any sort of like real gains for the Palestinian people. I don't know what the answer to that is, or I don't know which one of those factors is the biggest one. But yeah, I mean, I understand where Hamas comes from. I understand why they operate the way they do and what they're trying to do. Yeah.
Right. And I know you probably have a lot of people to talk to. I could go on for hours.
No,
but
you're good.
Last thing I want to say, or whatever. The next thing I want to say is, there's this whole argument that you were making that it was political, and that, but
that what was political?
Sorry. That that Lehi trying to ally with Nazi Germany was political.
Sure.
And I totally agree with that. I don't think. I mean, you can make the argument that there were connections because they both believed in racial supremacy, but I think that's kind of weak because obviously the Nazis hated Jewish people. What I would just say in response to that was that al-Husseini and Palestinian leadership, if you're going to make the argument, and a lot of Zionists do, a lot of pro-Israel people do, that Arab countries, especially Palestine, was just rife with anti-Semitism. They just hated Jews. That was the whole reason that they were against a Jewish state. It had nothing to do with land, it had nothing to do with politics. It was all religious. Well, al-Husseini, who was obviously a very prominent Palestinian leader, called himself he called himself secular when it came to governance. He identified like himself as a non-religious zealot, like a pragmatist. And also, obviously, he was getting a lot of money from the German government at the time. So, like,
he was also, I'm pretty sure he was also appointed by the British, wasn't he? Like, he was appointed mufti by the British.
Right. He was appointed by the British, and he was seen as one of the Britain's greatest allies. And then, kind of similar. I mean, I know Nick Fuentes dropped this tweet, this kind of very strange tweet recently. Like, the Likud and Hamas are exactly the same, which is just like such a strange thing to say. And there was this big debate, and a lot of people were talking about it. But in this case, there is a parallel in that there are a lot of Zionists who were super pro-Britain because of the Balfour Agreement. Then Britain promised a state for Israel, and then they kind of got disaffected. And the same thing happened with al-Husseini, that he was a massive fan of, he was a massive like ally of Britain, and he was like the British basically like kind of Palestinian correspondent in Palestine. And then what happened was he participated in the 1936 to 39 riots, and then the British all of a sudden hated him. He hated the British. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. He was exiled.
Yeah, I feel like from like after the Peel Commission, it feels like the British just hated everybody there. From 36 onwards, you had the big Arab riots, and I think the al-Husseini basically fashioned himself the leader of those riots. I think he was exiled or fled afterwards.
He did. He was exiled. Yeah. He was
and
exiled.
then the Brits tried to like cap Jewish immigration after to keep the fighting from happening, and then the Lehi and the Irgun started to do terrorism against the Brits, and then the Brits just leave, and they're like, fuck it, yeah.
Right. The British tried to be. They tried to be moderate. It ended up actually.
I will say one quick thing. I guess I have no idea what messages carry about me to the internet or whatever. But like one of the things that I've fought, even against a sizable portion of my fan base, is I don't think that religion became a major factor in this conflict until like around around the year 2000, I would say. Like, it doesn't seem like religion was a major factor, or maybe after like the 90s, once the fall of the Soviet Union and other countries start to align themselves with Israel. I don't think religion was ever a major factor in this conflict. I think it was like bubbling in the background. Like, I think it maybe like pushed people towards something.
That's interesting. So that is, I think that's, that's very interesting, because I guess one of the arguments that you'll hear a lot is obviously, like I said, it's Islamic fundamentalism. This is the root of all evil. All the Palestinians are terror. Like, you see Bill Maher and Dr. Phil. I don't know how much you watch Dr. Phil, but Dr. Phil said recently in an interview with Netanyahu, was like, he basically asked the question, so are all Palestinians terrorists, or just like 99% of them? And it's like, and you're right in that the religion, especially on the Arab side, and on the Palestinian side, was not really the biggest motivation. And
if you look at like all the early stuff, it's not, nobody's trying to create like as much a caliphate as they are like this kind of like pan-Arab, the Nasser obsession with all the Arabs in the region to create this like big Arab state. Yeah, I didn't feel like religion was a big driving force. And then the early Zionists were all secular, right? It wasn't until 1967 that they started to obsess over like the West Bank territory. Although you might
exactly, and that's the big problem, and is that like Ben Shapiro, and I'm not sure if you yourself said this, but Iran is, they're trying to establish this global caliphate, and they're trying to fund Hamas and Hezbollah in order to, kill all the Jewish people and kill all Americans. Well, Iran is like the worst. Well, obviously, I'm not like an Iran hater. I'm not like a neocon or anything. But Iran is not like a supporter of the Palestinian people, right? They haven't actually taken any meaningful material steps to actually help them. They just hate Israel.
Just hate because Saudi Arabia and Israel, I guess. By
they hate Saudi, exactly. They hate Saudi Arabia, who's like an ally with Israel, or ally, whatever, however you want to say it, and the U.S.
Enemy, my enemy is my friend.
Right. They want to become the leaders of the Muslim world, and they've utilized it. It's actually it's really kind of disgusting. They've utilized this conflict as a means of kind of trying to bridge the gap between the Sunnis and the Shias and the Persians and the Arabs in order to unify the Muslim world. And because the Palestinian conflict, and admittedly maybe partially because of anti-Semitism in the Arab world, although I don't think it's the biggest factor, they thought that the Israel-Palestine issue was like the thing that they could focus everything around. And so that's like, so then it becomes this huge scapegoat when, Iran, they say death to America, death to the Jews, and the Houthis say death to Jews and everything. It's like, well, that's not real. And you say, oh, we need a regime change in Iran. Ben Shapiro is a big fan of this. It's not really the pivotal the pivotal thing, right? It's not
Sure,
really
I guess there's like myths, but one of the big reasons why I argue a lot for this is it feels like there's myths on both sides that people use to make the conflict seem intractable. One myth on one side is the that it's all just like Islamic extremism, ignoring the fact that like the Arab aspect probably plays the Arab Jew or the Arab European Jew, at least initially, played a much bigger role than any religious thing. But then on the other side, like it's constantly stated that this is like the Israel-Palestinian conflict. It's the Israel-Palestinian conflict. It's conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. When in reality, that's just what it's like become after it was initially like an Arab-Israeli conflict. And that conflict was a lot different before, you know, the dominoes started to fall on the peace treaties. And to look at it now as though it's always just been Israelis dominating and bullying Palestinians when that wasn't how the region started, right, I guess from the 1880s onwards or whatever, is a little bit disingenuous too. Because then it makes it look like Israel's just been dominating and destroying Palestinians for 100 years with basically no resistance.
Now I have a serious disagreement with that. And that, well, you're right, and obviously that the Arab countries played a major role in the beginning of the conflict, you know, but then you have to admit that, well, when Jordan, you know, was had control over the West Bank, obviously the Palestinians and Jordans, they're similar culturally, they're similar. I think they're distinct, but you know, they're similar. And Palestinians had positions of power in Jordan. They had representation. They were, you know, they had seats and they were represented.
I would be,
but
real quick on that, and I don't know because I haven't read as detailed here, but I've heard mixed things on that. So initially I had read that the Palestinians were happy to be a part of Jordan. Jordan completely annexed the West Bank and made them all citizens. But I mean, they also assassinated, was it Abdullah in 51 in Jerusalem? Because apparently there was a lot of frustration as well of Jordan like taking over the West Bank and not creating like basically a way for a Palestinian state to emerge, right? Because Abdullah and then I think Hussein wanted to make the West Bank basically part of Jordan. Like that was like the long-term goal, and then that basically fell apart. I think in the 80s. There's
a lot of hatred. I mean, especially towards, especially later on, towards the Jordanian government, because you know they're Israel simps and all they care about is being allies with the United States, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, because the Palestinians want a national identity. And there's another myth, dude, is that there's no like Palestinian national identity before like.
Not until like the 1920s at the earliest, whenever that Mufti guy shows up.
I would argue that the Palestinian national identity formed arguably in the 1800s when the Ottoman Empire started. Well, listen, when the Ottoman Empire started making the, you know, like Jerusalem directly subordinate to Constantinople instead of Syria, this is when Palestine, and also when a Palestinian actual national identity started to form, like culturally, when it started to become like its own distinct, like separate from Syria and separate from Jordan and separate from Lebanon, it became its own distinct thing. I'm not saying that the lines, like all the
yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Exactly
there
right,
might have been like, I think people would have
Benny
more.
Morris, let me just say this. Benny Morris actually corroborates this, that Palestinian national identity started to form sometime in the 1800s.
Sure. I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by started to form. If you're telling me that like there were people in Jerusalem, or people in Jaffa, Haifa, what's the port near Tel Aviv? I think it's Jaffa, isn't it? If you're going to tell me that like the people there, people there started to have feelings about like being more united or being like having some kind of government or representation or something. Although these terms are weird because in the 1800s people didn't necessarily see it that way. You could argue that maybe started then, but I think that the major thrust of the Palestinian identity started to form in response to the immigration by European Jews. I think that's when it really started to take off.
Which, I mean, okay, so I mean, it is a tough conversation because when does national identity actually start to form? It's like, I mean, if you want to actually answer that question, you kind of have to completely, it's more of a historical, I mean, I guess philosophical question as well. But if you're going to say that the Palestinian national identity came in response to, you know, an external like oppositional force, I don't even think that's that, like, I don't think that's that radical. I don't think it's...
Sure, well, I mean, like, the issue is that, like, people can't divorce any of the factual analysis from normatively loading everything. And I think the issue is that, like, I think that if you're a pro-Palestinian, I think that you can argue a lot of these things, and I don't even want to say make concessions, but just like grant a lot of things without it taking like an iota away from the actual argument. Because people think that the Palestinian state needed to exist in some form prior to Jews being there. Otherwise, they lose their ability to have any moral arguments for trying to repel European Jews. Yeah.
Exactly.
So because that moral thing is loaded there, well, now it's a it's a necessity, a factual necessity that a Palestinian nation state of some kind was existing. Because if it's not, holy shit, we just lost our whole like argument.
It's just they just hate Jewish people.
Basically, yeah. But like you said, I think you can make the argument that like, yeah, identities can form in response sometimes to other things. Arguably, my history is not the greatest if I haven't like super studied it, but like arguably, I would say probably U.S. identity formed to some extent in retaliation to. In the Revolutionary War, right? In retaliation to the Brits, that like how we drove ourselves to like a federalized system, probably to some extent had to do with like.
And that's not to say that the roots of American culture weren't already planted before the Revolution, but it is to say that like you can't ever like form something really concrete without some sort of oppositional. This is true of everything. This is true in nature. This is true.
Definitionally, things are what they aren't, right? You kind of have to have boundaries.
Things are what they are in relation to other things. I mean, some religious people would probably disagree with that, but. But it's true in that you do need some sort of oppositional force, and so what were we talking about? National identity. Why are we even get into that?
We were just talking about when national identity started to form. We probably roughly agree on it because you were saying, Lady, it's possible that there are things that I think in cities people started to feel, but it feels like in the Palestinian land or in the Levant that like people were generally spread out as kind of like tribes and families of people. You had like your villages and your small cities, and that's how people identified more so than as like huge nation states, which is also kind of consistent with at the time, like the concepts of nations and countries and states were still being figured out even in Europe, I think, right?
Oh, here's what we were talking. Yeah. So the idea that it was all like it was an Arab-Israeli conflict. This is why I went off on this tangent. It's because in Jordan, yes, there was some animosity towards the Jordanian government, but overall, like it's not like they were super oppressed. It's not like anything like terrible happened. But in Egypt, the Egyptians, and this is true today, they do not care about the Gazans at all. Like they really, all they care about is getting as much land as they can, getting as much power as they can. And obviously, like I mean, this is true of most countries. When Gazans were under the rule of Egypt,
like a 1 year fake government, yeah.
They didn't really have any voting rights. They didn't have representation. They were repressed. I think it might be a little extreme to say they were oppressed, but they were certainly repressed.
I think you can say they were oppressed because they had a government for 1 year that I think got recalled to Cairo and then disbanded, and they were also banned from traveling outside of the Gaza Strip as well. Exactly, so they were basically they were Egypt fucked them.
Yeah, they were basically stuck in a cage. And so when you say that it's an Arab-Israeli conflict, not a Palestinian Arab conflict, I think this is true in 1948. I think it's true now. I think it's probably true before 1948 as well. And that the Arab countries, they care about political power. They care about, to a certain extent, not like having, pan-Arabism or whatever. But ultimately, it was kind of Israel against the Palestinians, and Israel was dominant of the Palestinians from the very beginning. From the very beginning. I mean, maybe like from 1948, really from, I guess you could say from 1967 is when it really started, but the discriminatory laws in Israel and the housing permits and the evictions and all this kind of stuff, and obviously the Nakba happened in 48. The Arab countries, and as you know, I heard a debate with you, you had a debate about this, the Arab countries were not that supportive of Palestine. And so like even in
Well, yeah, but careful. I agree with you when you say the Arab countries weren't that supportive of Palestine, but they weren't supportive of Palestine the same way Hamas isn't supportive of Palestine. They see it as an opportunity to leverage them to fight with Israel. So from an Israeli perspective, you don't really care if they're supporting Palestine or not. All you know is that they're willing to support them in a never-ending struggle to destroy you. So I agree with you that the countries
which ended up not being true at all, because as like the 1979 peace agreement with Egypt, Saudi Arabia established diplomatic ties, and they say they're going to cut off diplomatic. Obviously, Saudi Arabia is not going to cut off diplomatic ties.
Sure, but wait, where did those peace treaties only came because they were forged through multiple wars that Israel happened to survive, right?
Right. Which were only fought because Egypt and the Arab countries wanted land. And I would argue that all these wars, the four Arab-Israeli wars, were not fought in the interest of the Palestinian people at all. So when you say that it was an Arab-Israeli conflict and that Israel wasn't dominating Palestinians from the beginning, I'd say, well, okay, and Gaza is controlled by Egypt, and West Bank was controlled by Jordan. But there were still massive discriminatory laws towards Palestinians that the Arabs did nothing about, that other Arab countries like Egypt did nothing about. There's still like the occupation that Arab countries did nothing about.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. What I'm looking at is so this is to bring in some normativity. If Israel and Palestine have existed in this state for 80 years, then it is inconceivable that it could be this way unless like Israelis are just horrible, evil people. How could you oppress one group of people for so long. It's just
That's
it's completely asymmetrical. But if you go back,
you cut out there.
or sorry.
Sorry, you put out there.
Yeah, I'm saying that if you project the status quo today onto the past, you try to think, well, how the fuck can Israel suppress a group of people for so long? This is unhinged. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. But then if you look and you're like, okay, well, initially it wasn't just Israel versus Palestinians. It was Israel versus all of the Arabs. And then now it's gotten basically through capsule theory or whatever else, now it's gotten wheedled down until it's just Israel and the Palestinians, but that's not where it started from. And to pretend that it's always been that way, I think is disingenuous, and it makes one side seem way more insane than they actually are. Yeah.
Right. The point is not to say that the Arab countries did not have any involvement in it, or even that Israel wasn't fighting against Arab countries, because the focus is really on what Israel has done to the Palestinians. And you can, I do believe that you can see that in isolation to the Arab countries. So, I mean, obviously we just go through a super quickly, like the invalidation of the housing permits in order to lawfully evict all the as many Palestinian residents as possible in 1948.
Sure. From 48 to 67, I don't believe that the Arabs in Israel even had the right to vote. I don't think they were given that until 67, right?
Oh, I actually didn't know that. I've read a lot about the rights of
I'm pretty sure they didn't have the Arabs that lived there. Yeah.
So, but even after 1967, in Israel, obviously Palestinians have not had equal rights. And I know that you've.
Well, careful. Wait. Can you qualify that when you say that?
That Arabs. So I will say Arab, non-Jewish Arabs
Are in Israel, like proper, or are you including the West Bank and the Gaza Strip?
In Israel proper, not even. I mean, what's happening in the West Bank, I think you can agree with this as well, is horrible and disgusting and against international law, and clearly should change, like the settlements.
Sure. When we say that Israel doesn't treat the Arab citizens well, what do we mean by that? What is the discrimination there? What are we talking about there?
Right. So there are tons. Well, okay. Obviously, there are not going to be any explicit laws because Israel, they're not idiots. They know that can be used very easily against them. But there are things like, I mean, you probably know all this stuff. There's things like the admissions committee law, the leave and bread law, stop and frisk. There's the whole idea that the defense minister is the sole proprietor of what group is a terrorist organization, what isn't. And of course, the IDF or the Israeli police system, they find out who is a terrorist organization, which is the vetting process for that is incredibly weak. And then they go through and they can actually revoke the citizenship of anybody who is even remotely affiliated with the terrorist organization.
Okay, so here's a question: Are you from America? I'm just so I can ask American questions.
Yeah. You can hear my. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have an American accent. Yeah,
sure. Okay. Would you say that, like, when you consider black people in the United States, would you consider that America is a nation that, like, doesn't have equal rights for people? Or I'm just trying to get like a bearing on what you're. If you want the next question, I'm going to ask it. So, like, if you're going to tell me, for instance, that like some form of discrimination or whatnot exists throughout Israel against Arab people, like, I'm sure that must be true. Like, I think every country has some form of discrimination. But in terms of like, and because you yourself said it wasn't like codified or in law, I don't know if it's something that would be like worth mentioning in regards to this conflict. Like, it's a significant thing. Who knows? Listen, I'm going to Israel at the end of the month. I hope to ask a bunch of Arab citizens, but like, is it like I don't think it's like a oppression type thing against. Yeah,
it's huge. Okay, so you can argue. Like, okay, is it an oppression type thing? I think if you're going to compare that to the oppression of, I don't know, people under Boko Haram, just for a crazy example, or people, the Jews under Hitler. Obviously, it's nowhere near that level of oppression, but it almost doesn't matter because I think it's indicative of the extremely racist ideology that is very powerful. And again, I'm not saying all Israelis are racist or anything like that, but Itamar Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and to a certain extent, well, that's certainly Netanyahu as well. There's an extremely racist and anti-Arab ideology. And
well,
again,
when we say,
this is actually let me just finish real quick.
Yeah.
There's also an anti-Semitic ideology too, because obviously the Atzma Yehuit party doesn't believe that Arab Jews are real Jews. They don't think that they belong in Israel, right? So what were you going to say?
When we say like extremely racist, I feel like how are we qualifying this?
Oh, well, this actually, and maybe you'll be able to appreciate this. This is, this comes from, well, the Koch party, which was, made illegal, which kind of transformed into Atzma Yehuda party. That their ideology is. I mean, do you want me to give you quotes? Do you want me to give you like?
Well, here, this is what I'm trying to wait. This is what I'm trying to like draw a distinction between. I guess is that like if you're going to tell me that there are racist people in Israel, like I'm sure I'm going to believe you, right? There's
of course.
like just like there are racist people in every country. It's not to downplay racism, but I feel like sometimes when people talk about like racism in Israel, they try to elevate that to this extra special status of like, well, it's actually really bad in Israel or exceptionally bad, and I have a hard time reconciling that with. One, the massive Arab population that exists in Israel today, and then two, the times in the past where Israel has been willing to negotiate like land where they would have had a sizable Arab population living within their borders. It seems hard to reconcile that. Like these are things that no Arab state would have ever accepted. Okay.
First of all, I'll say, and look, Zionists agree. Zionists would completely say that what I'm saying is right. I think you would probably too. That the big part of Israel today and like a lot of the Zionist ideologies today is, of course, they don't want Arabs in the land. That's part of having a Jewish homeland. They want it to all be Jewish.
I disagree with that, and I think early Zionists would have disagreed with that, by the way. But go ahead.
Okay, let me make my point, and then we can discuss that. The whole point, though, is that there's a Jewish majority, not that like, and as long as they maintain the power. So, like, when I say that Israel is a racist country, well, of course, like you could say any country is a racist. Australia is a racist country. Britain is a racist country. The United States is a racist country. Well, the reason it's different in Israel is because and by the way, it means Jewish power. That party has an extremely large amount of power in the Netanyahu coalition, and because like Netanyahu, I'll always say this, Netanyahu is obviously terrible. But he's way worse than he comes off way worse than he actually is because he's controlled by his
coalition government.
Exactly. And so obviously I hate Netanyahu, not a fan of him at all. I think he's a horrible person. But if he did everything the way he thought that he wanted, or if he did everything the way he wanted to do it, it would not be as extreme as it is now because he has to listen to his ultra right-wing compatriots. And so let me just give you a quick example of why this is so important and why this is actually why this is evidence of such extreme Israeli racism, especially towards Arabs and also towards Jewish, also towards Jewish people, is that, the Baruch Goldstein, the terrorist who I think it was 1996, who went into a mosque and killed 26 Muslims. Itamar Ben-Gvir had a painting of him in his living room. And so you could say, well, this is one person. This is so irrelevant. This is not representative of racism in Israeli culture at all. What I would say is look, we can be honest and say that maybe not every single Israeli is racist. But when it would almost be as if we had Richard Spencer being like the Speaker of the House. It's like you could easily argue that if Richard Spencer or David Duke was the Speaker of the House right now, then America, you have to acknowledge that America.
I think the issue is you have to look at
and that policies. Yeah,
you have to look at like where these people are coming from. Right? Like the shift to the right didn't happen out of nowhere. I think the shift to the right happened because it seemed like it was incapable that the Palestinians and the Israelis could ever in good faith approach each other in peaceful ways, right? That even throughout the entirety of the Oslo Accords, you had even during the Oslo Accords, I think that when Netanyahu was trying to he agreed to that Y memorandum and he was trying to do some of that transfer, that like destroyed his fucking government. That's why he lost office.
Right.
And that so even when he was trying peace, because every time they would get close on something, there'd be another Palestinian terrorist attack, or the Palestinians would see another swath of permits authorized for the West Bank, and this back and forth kept happening, and then finally it feels like the climax was kind of like Camp David Taba Summit, and then nothing materialized from that, and then it was well, Second Intifada, fuck this, and then when you're Jewish, you're looking, it's okay, well, we left Lebanon, and now we have Hezbollah. Well, we pulled out of Gaza after the Second Intifada. Now we've got Hamas. Every single time we're doing anything with Palestinians, we're always getting terrorist attacks. It seems like they're trying to kill us, and in every part we don't have control. I understand. I'm not trying to say that that the status quo is acceptable because of this, but I think to look at that context, and this is just over the last 20 years or 30 years, to look at that context and go, well, it must just be a lot of racism. I don't think that's a fair statement. That's the silliest saying that it started because of religion. Yeah.
I don't think you're completely wrong, but I do think you're wrong. And so first of all, can I ask you, have you heard the conspiracy theory that, this is just an aside, have you heard the conspiracy theory that Monica Lewinsky was a Mossad agent who tried to derail the Oslo Accords?
No, but that's really funny.
Yeah, I did a video. If you're listening, I have a YouTube channel, Aiden Doyle Politics. I have a video on it. It's a crazy conspiracy theory. And also, I know that you were just talking about or you talked about in a debate recently, all the weapons that came in from Czechoslovakia. The person who brought in the weapons, it was Robert Maxwell.
I don't know who that is, but okay. Who is that?
That's Ghislaine Maxwell's dad.
Okay. Gotcha.
Sorry, that was an aside.
When you say he brought in the weapons, do you mean like he had like a 5% ownership stake in the company that made the submersible? Or do you mean like he was piloting the submersibles or what?
He smuggled in weapons to Israel.
What do you mean by he smuggled in weapons? Like he was driving the boat? He paid for it? Like what is that involvement?
No, he organized it. Like he was a major, and it's Yitzhak Shamir, my least favorite Israeli prime minister. No, I'm kidding. But he said at Robert Maxwell's funeral, we owe a debt of gratitude to Robert Maxwell that no one can speak of. And it's kind of like, well, what do you mean no one can speak of? Why don't you just, obviously people say that kind of colloquially, but it's kind of a little weird. Like, why was Robert Maxwell so valuable to the Israeli people? It's because, well, obviously, this is during the embargo on Israel, when Britain and the US wouldn't sell arms to Israel. Robert Maxwell was smuggling in arms to Israel from Czechoslovakia. And obviously, there's this whole conspiracy theory. Again, I'm not really sure if I...
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. My brain just got... Okay. When you say smuggling arms into Israel from Czechoslovakia, you're talking about for the war in 48. Not for Hamas. Yes. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. My brain got fucked. Okay.
No.
I didn't know. Yeah. Okay.
To the IDF.
Okay. Sure.
And so then obviously Robert Maxwell is Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, and Epstein and Maxwell were obviously they were partners. And so there's this whole again, I don't really believe it, but there's this whole conspiracy theory that Epstein was part of the Mossad, and then you realize when you learn that Maxwell was literally he's an IDF agent. It just makes it all a little crazier. But my whole point is, I would say that you're wrong in saying that right-wing extremism in Israel started just in recent times, when, as a response to Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran being so anti-Israel and Hamas, bombing, relentlessly bombing Israel. You really can't say that. And the reason is because as early as, obviously Moses Hess and all these other really early Zionists, communist Zionists, socialist Zionists, they didn't really fit into this category. But once you got into Theodor Herzl and like the beginning of like mainstream Zionism, ethnic cleansing and anti-Arab sentiment and really just any anti-non-Jewish sentiment, which I think you can classify as right-wing, even though Theodor Herzl wasn't really
calling it right-wing is kind of weird, especially when they started these like mini communist societies. But
Theodor Herzl was not right-wing. What I'm saying is that what he said, and he said we have to ethnically cleanse the Arabs.
Hold on. To be clear, he didn't say that. Nobody's. There's no ethnically cleanse isn't even a term that's like used until like.
Okay. Here's what I can give you. Tell you exactly what he said. Okay, he said we need to say on the surface we love Arabs and we want them to have jobs here and etc. We need to say that out. But then inwardly, what he said was, and this is what he said at the Zionist conventions, the congresses, all these things that like where they were talking in private. He said in his diaries, we need to basically prop up. Like jobs, give other Arab countries, which is kind of ironic because it's kind of funny. This is exactly what they're doing right now, Saudi Arabia and Egypt. We need to have an alliance with other Arab countries, and this is what they did with Iran and Turkey as well, from 1948 to like 1979. So that Arabs can find prosperity in other countries. Simultaneously, what we need to do is make sure that Arabs have no jobs here. And so the whole thing, and then, Theodor Herzl outwardly, he condemned the Sursic purchases and the massive purchases of, 5% of Palestine by Zionist organizations in America. He condemned that, but then he was also like, well, he condemned the evictions of Arab tenants, but then on the inside, he's like, this is actually exactly what we need to do. So Theodor Herzl was not a right winger. He was actually like a liberal, secular Jewish guy he's from Germany, I think, who really was not like a great.
I understand. Okay, sure. So here's the issue.
Let me just say this real quick. Yeah. Is that the right wing part is that he wanted to expel non-Jewish people.
Sure. I don't think there's nothing right wing about that, right? That's just like a thing, like population transfer. Not saying it's good or bad, but I don't think to call that right wing or left wing is kind of weird, right?
It's a form of nationalism. It's a form of nationalism.
Maybe. But like you call that a form of nationalism, but if they would have bought land and kept the Arabs there and just like had the Arabs working for them, well, then we would call it exploitation and imperialism, no? Like, it's not like that would have been any better, no?
Because it would be.
Yeah, right? so like that's a lose-lose. So, okay, so hold on. So backing up for a second, okay? I don't disagree that the aspirations of the early Zionists were high. Okay, but there's a couple things to keep in mind. One is Theodor Herzl died in 1905 or something. Okay, so this guy's dead. Yeah, way before any Israel is even forming. Way before like even the big Aliyah waves of people are even making it down there. Okay, this guy's already dead. And then two, something that I think that people don't contend with or pretend isn't a reality is that Israel can have aspirations, but because they're always on the brink of extinction, at least prior to 73, Israel has to contend with political realities. And they did that. They did that really well. And it feels like every time there was an important decision that Israel had to make that would have costed its existence or solidified its existence, they made the right decision. But when you look at the Palestinians and the Arabs, every time they had to make a decision, they made the wrong decision. They made the worst decision. And I think that people will look back and say, oh, well, look, this was always the plan of the Jews. But I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that when Arab leaders were making intelligent political decisions, Israel had to go along with it. Israel was only able to expand on the land that they had, capitalizing off of the mistakes of their neighbors. And I don't think people recognize, like, if for instance, and we can argue that, well, they had no good reason to accept it, fine, sure. But like, if they would have accepted the 47 partition plan, Israel probably stops there. Like, I don't know if they can expand anymore because they would have absolutely no support from the Western world. Look,
I do think this is like a big misconception.
Okay.
And this is what we hear. And this is like, I'm glad that I kind of expect you to say this too. I'm glad that a lot of Zionists say, okay, Israel has always tried to find peace. All they want is peace. They just want peace.
Hold on, wait. Let me just read, because I don't want to be paraphrasing that way. That is not true. Israel does not want peace, at least early on. Israel wanted war and conflict, but they didn't want to be the ones to instigate it, because if they got that war and conflict, then they would have the opportunity to expand off of that war and conflict. So Israel didn't want peace, but if an Arab presents them with peace, they're forced to contend with that, is what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, and so Israel always wants. So this is what I'm saying, is that a lot of maybe less educated Zionists on Twitter will say this, is that like Israel always wants peace, all they want is peace, and Hamas, they're just terrorists and they hate Jewish people and they never want peace. And it's like, well, no, Israel does want war. And this is, you can say this of a lot of countries. You can say this of the United States, of Britain,
of Palestine, of Arab countries. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I like to use the imperialist examples, but it's true of any country ever. Is that,
wait, hold on, we don't consider any of the Arab states imperialist? When Nasser was sending tens of thousands of troops to Yemen, that wasn't a form of imperialism. When the IRGC and the Quds Force operates internationally from Iran, that's not imperialism. When Saudi Arabia,
I don't want to get diverted, but
okay, sure, okay.
Egypt. But yes, there are Arab countries that have been imperialist. That's not. I'm not.
Everybody, they're all imperialist. We all do a little bits of imperialism, but okay, go ahead.
But my point is that what were you even saying? We got imperialism.
Oh, sorry, it had to do with Israel doesn't want peace, but if they get the conflict from the Arab states, they can capitalize off it. Yeah,
this is especially true of Israel. This is true in 1981 during the Lebanese War. This is true, arguably in 1967 as well. I know you might disagree with that. That Israel. They want war so that they can expand their territories. In 1981, it was an example of, this is right the year before the Lebanese, 1980, 1981, right before the Lebanese invasion. They were, prodding and provoking the PLO during a peace treaty so that they could invade Lebanon. And then they pretended, do you know who Abu Nidal is?
No.
Abu Nidal is this guy. He was a Palestinian terrorist who tried to kill the Israeli foreign minister in London. But he wasn't part of the PLO. So Israel basically said, this guy is part of the PLO, even though he wasn't, so we're going to invade Lebanon. And that was kind of like their final, the straw that broke the camel's back, that they were their justification for invading Lebanon. So yes, you're right, that Israel doesn't want peace. They want to expand their territory. My argument, though, would be, is that their goal to expand their territories to all of Greater Israel began in the early 1900s when Zionism started, and it still exists today. I don't think you can argue that. Even in 1948, David Ben-Gurion is quoted as saying, like, so many times, we're going to accept everything. We're going to accept even the tiniest little bit of land, because from there we will expand and expand and expand. And that's what they're doing. Like a lot, I guess you could say like, oh, but this was early. This was like before 1948.
I understand. Listen, hold on. I understand this. Hold on. This drives me. I understand. This is a one-sided telling. Okay. I do agree that Israel wanted to expand, but do you acknowledge that Arabs always gave them a valid reason to? That Israel didn't want to fight on the West Bank in '67, but Jordan was kind of forced to attack, and that's when they lost the West Bank. That Israel did accept the 47 partition plan. That Israel would have
in 67. Sorry.
In 67. In '67, Jordan attacked from the West Bank, and I don't think Israel didn't want them to attack. I think there were 2 explicit messages that were sent saying, "Don't do it, don't attack us, don't do this." And I think the quote is, "The die has been cast already." To be fair, the monarchy would have collapsed probably in Jordan if he didn't fight. But I mean, like, if you get attacked from those lands, I mean, well, fuck it. Now you counter invaded. That's what happened, right? That's how they got the Sinai. That's how they got the West Bank. That's how they got the Golan Heights. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not gonna play both sides. You're only playing one side, okay? I'm not disagreeing with you that Israel always wanted to expand.
Say one side. Say one side. That's fine.
Well, no, because that's bullshit. The Arabs always gave the Israelis the perfect excuse to expand their territory in a way that made it really hard to blame the Israelis, because every single one of these wars is essentially a war of destruction. If Israel loses, right? If Israel loses in 67 or 73, that state is
which would be perfectly reasonable to say if like if it wasn't in their ideology to expand from the beginning. And so I know this is uncharitable. You're going to say this is uncharitable because, well, of course, if the Arabs attack, you're going to attack back. Well, here's the thing. I mean, Plan D and how they planned 10 years in advance. They were gonna attack these Arab villages anyways and take it back.
No, I don't believe. I don't believe
it wasn't a contingency plan. It wasn't a contingency plan. They were waiting for something to happen so that they could attack these areas. And then in 1967, Egypt, to say that Egypt wanted a war with Israel is absurd, because they had all of their, well, you just said it, they had all of their military resources tied up in Yemen because they were trying to support the Republican uprising against the royalists.
Sure, that's fine that we can say they didn't want the war, and I agree with you, but you can't play brinksmanship that much and expect nothing to happen. Like, did they want the war? Absolutely not. But when you've got a guy who's worshipped in the entire Arab world as promising everybody, including the Palestinians, he wants to destroy Israel, and then you start expelling peacekeeping forces and deploying your forces sloppily throughout the fucking Sinai to show how big and brave you are, and then you close down a fucking strait that literally caused a war like 14 years earlier, right? In 56 or whatever, 67, 56, 11 years earlier, right? I mean, what do you think is going to happen, right? And then you're also forming an alliance, because I think it's, at this point, I don't think it's Syria and Egypt. I think they're actually the United Arab Republic, I think, for the 67 war, right? So you've got this whole united front, these political, you've got the military alliances and everything. So, I mean, like, what do you expect, right? Yeah, like, Israel preemptively attacked in that war, 100%. And they lied about it, I think, for like a week. It took them to reveal that. But, like, it's understandable why they felt like they were about to be destroyed, because the brinksmanship being played on the Arab side was insane. Like, the statements to the trade unionists, the statements to the Arab League,
Yeah, you're not wrong that like, of course there were tensions between Egypt and Israel, and of course Egypt was militarizing its border. But then you also have to say, okay, did Israel attack Egypt for defense of itself, or did Israel attack Egypt because they wanted more land? And this is why this is important. I know you're just going to justify the Israeli invasion of Gaza and of the West Bank. And I think outside of the context of Zionism, that would be a lot more understandable. But when you understand that the whole Zionist maximalist mission was to conquer all of Greater Israel, and it still is, then I think that argument becomes a lot weaker.
But the problem is, in fact, the argument is 100% foolproof, which is unfortunate, because what happens is we can argue that Zionism is an expansionist ideology that demanded a massive population transfer of Arabs to ever be feasible, because of the land that they wanted that was already inhabited by people, because of the size of the territory. We can say that, but it's like saying there's a man-hating woman who just really wants to kill men, who goes into a bar and happens to kill 10 guys who try to rape her. Like, I mean, would she have done it anyway? Maybe, but like, when you look at the Arab-Israeli conflict, it's not like there are all these huge peace deals on the table that Israel was walking away from. It was generally the Arab states, and for Palestine, it's exclusively Palestinians walking away from any kind of like concrete peace deal. So to say that, like, well, Zionists would have always expanded, I don't think that's true. To say they wanted to, that's definitely true. But would they have, when confronted with a strong person who wanted to seek peace? I mean, when I look at Anwar Sadat and I see that, well, they got the Sinai back for that whole peace deal, it seems like confronted with a leader who is actually pushing strongly for peace, it feels like Israelis have to contend with that political reality. And
okay, and I'm not going to sit here and make the argument. Every Arab country, all the Palestinians, all they wanted was peace, and they're all the only side that wants peace. And
wait, which way? Say that again.
I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that only Palestinians want peace, only Arabs want peace, and Israel just want war and destruction. I'm not here to say that. What I am here to say, though, is that, and I've already said this, I believe, and I think you agree, that it is part of the Zionist ideology. Okay, so we agree on that. It's part of the Zionist ideology to try and have all of Israel. Whether that's true right now is kind of what's up for contention. I think if you are confronted with a peace deal and what you see as your own land, which obviously the Palestinians do, and they've been living there for hundreds to thousands of years, it's like, okay, is it more reasonable for you to reject a peace deal if there has been tons of immigration from Zionists into your country to establish a state, if you're in that position, or if you're in the position of the people who have colonized the land?
Well, I mean, they're all colonizers. Just depends on how far back you want to run it, right?
Okay, but as of right now, the colonizers, they were the Zionists. The Zionists were the colonizers.
I mean, as of right now, but I mean, the Ottoman Empire before. I mean.
Well, right, but the Ottoman Empire doesn't exist, which I think is
because they lost a war, yeah, and then they no longer exist. But
about Ottoman Empire, all these Arab countries were imperialist. Well, look, if Egypt had imperialized South Africa and they were oppressing them, then yes, of course we'd all be against that. But that's not really the reality of the situation, right? It's that Israel, it's not obviously not a colony, but the state of Israel was colonized by the Zionists. The Palestine was colonized by.
I think colonized is not the right word. Like colonized by who? What is it?
Well, and it's currently oppressing the Palestinians. I think that's the important.
Well, hold on. The colony doesn't make sense. Who are they? Who is Israel a colony of?
No, Israel's not a colony. So that's again, that's another.
Is immigration colonizing or?
No. So I mean, so let me just get this straight. You don't think that Zionists colonized Palestine?
The word colonize is super loaded. I don't know if I would say the word.
Let me I actually looked this up before this debate because I wanted to know exactly what the definition was. To colonize does not necessarily mean to create a colony. It says of a country or its citizens to send a group of settlers to establish political control over it. So it doesn't mean to create a colony. Like Israel is not a colony, but they did colonize the land. Right?
Well, what's interesting? I mean, they immigrated to a place where there wasn't an existing government, and they tried their best to set up a state, and that's essentially what happened, right? After the collapse of the Ottoman Empire.
Existing government, I think, is a little loose, but they immigrated to a place where there was already a people. I think that's the fairest way of saying it. But
they didn't have like indefinite rights to that land forever. Again, the Ottoman Empire collapsed. They lost the war. It was Britain's land to administer to. Yeah,
it was Britain's land to administer. That doesn't really change the fact that they allowed Zionists to colonize the land.
The Zionists bought land from there and then they immigrated in for sure. Should that have been like banned or not allowed? Or
whoa. They didn't. They bought land. They bought 5% of the land, and then Britain set up a state, which is why the whole Lehi argument that Britain.
Wait. They brought how much percentage of the land did the Palestinians buy? What do you mean they bought 5% of the land? Yeah, they bought the land that they moved their people in on, and then eventually they got more, but they didn't get it from the British. They got it through war.
No. They got it through the establishment of the Israeli state in 1948.
That state came from war. They had to fight. Those borders are born in blood, right?
That's true because the borders were actually. They were still terrible for the Palestinians, obviously, but they were better than they were after 1948. But that doesn't really change that doesn't change anything, right? It's not like because a war was fought, because of a bloody civil war where a lot of Arabs and a lot of Palestinians and a lot of Israelis died. Doesn't change the fact that it was a process of colonization. And again, obviously the facts and what happened and the war, about the Civil War from the Civil War 1947-ish to 1949, and how a lot of the middle class Arabs left, and that's a big reason why the Palestinians, why they're kind of
sure. And a lot of the leadership got crushed from 36 onwards as well, yeah.
And so these facts are super important, and we should pay attention to them. But then it's also the ideology is also important, and the ideology, and I don't mean to be a Benny Morris simp or sycophant or anything like that. But this is what he refers to the Zionists as colonialists. Theodore Herzl does too. And so when you have super important, especially Theodore Herzl, the founder Zionists referring to Zionists as colonialists and as colonizing the land. I think that's very relevant, and then you have to see these wars, these riots, the Haifa riots and the Hebron riots and the 1936 riots. You have to see it as the Palestinians are victims of colonization, not as the era.
But everybody's a victim of something. I mean, where do we stop with that, right? The Jews are the victim of the Holocaust. The Jews are victims of intra-violence in Palestine, prior to the 36.
Right, which is why the idea that Jewish people should have a state, even though we and I are both liberals, nationalism is not really part of our ideology, and like establishing a state based on ethnic lines is not really part of our ideology. But it makes a lot more sense for like the Jewish people to have a state because of the persecution that they suffered throughout the years. But that state shouldn't be on another people's land. That's the whole point.
Sure, but I mean, then the question is like, so was it wrong for them to buy land? Like you mentioned the Sursok purchases. Was it wrong for them to buy?
On a moral level, of course, yeah, of course.
Okay, so
so this, I mean, dude, I'm a progressive. I don't believe that anybody from a different country should be buying land in like an underdeveloped
Well, hold
part
on,
of the
we can
world.
be progressives, but like our society is going to dictate to some extent the moral boundaries that we can operate within, right?
Right. Sure. Absolutely. I mean, we can have a philosophical conversation about that,
Sure.
but we don't need
I'm just saying that, like, if we were fighting in World War II and there's a guy running at you, like, without a uniform and he looks like Asian, like, and my friend is like, I have to shoot and kill this guy. Like, well, hold on, don't racially profile him. I'm a progressive. Like, just because he looks Japanese doesn't mean he's an enemy. I don't think that same argument works 80 years later, right? I don't think that you can project onto the past, like, our current moral operatings within our own country and then apply that to other people that are having conflicts like between themselves over different like nations or groups of people or whatever you want to call it, right? I think that's a fool's errand.
So that's actually a really important point. That's what I was thinking about this the other day, is that because I'm a philosophy major, so I was writing a paper on some Hume thing that he's some theories of human understanding, so one part of that book. And you're right in that, like, how can we really reasonably say that the American standard should be the standard for everyone? How can we say that our own moral system, our own moral code should be the standard for everyone? And ultimately, as liberals, I don't know if you're an atheist or not, but you kind of don't really have any reason to believe that your morals are superior to other ones. If you believe in God, you can say, well, God exists, so of course everything that we believe has to be right because God exists. And so you're right. Why would, as kind of a liberal democratic country, why do we have any moral superiority or moral authority over anyone else? And the reality is we really don't. But you can say,
hold on. I mean, there are moral systems. Whether if you do philosophy, I'm sure you've heard of Kant, right? There are moral systems that you can argue for, establish some sort of objective moral theory that doesn't require a God, right?
No, that's true, but then the argument in response to that would be, what is your epistemic justification for that argument? Because ultimately, and this is what Hume said, is that you keep on when you have a moral theory. Let's say you say hitting somebody is wrong. You say, well, why is hitting somebody wrong? And you say because it hurts them. Well, why is hurting them wrong? And then you have to continually doubt every single thought process, every single logical process, ad infinitum, forever. And this is true. This is why you can't, if there's no regularity of nature, you can't actually have any concrete moral system. And so, look, if we don't believe in God, then all we can say is we kind of believe what we believe, and we just believe what we believe. But in spite of that, in spite of really having no justification for American moral authority over Islam or over Judaism, over like Christian national, whatever, we can just say, this is what we believe. I don't believe that when you buy land in another country, you evict the tenants of that land for your own personal motives. I don't think that's right. And especially true, like, if the U.S. buys land.
By what? Are you religious?
I believe in God. Yeah, I'm a Catholic.
Do you have like some sort of like foundational like epistemic justification for where buying land and kicking people off comes from, or?
For epistemic justification. No, that's actually my whole point, is that we literally, it's impossible to, unless you believe in God. And I've said I believe in God, but my whole point is that these moral claims, they don't come from my belief in God. They become from, like you said, it's kind of like we just have our own moral constructs. And so,
I think real quick, are you familiar with the term jus cogens?
No.
Like, I think that there are, I think it's usually used in regards to international norms and laws, but like, I think that there are some things that are like universally wrong and bad that all of us should agree on. So like rape is probably one of these things. Murder is probably one of these things. Exploitation of children at least in an extreme amount, maybe not making a 17-year-old work, but like making a 6-year-old work in a factory. Like there are some things I think that we can all agree on where it's like, these are always wrong. But I think there are other things that get, that are way more contextualized to a particular time or society. And I feel like when we start talking about land, I think that you're in that where we have to hyper contextualize what's being talked about, right? Like right now, I live in an apartment. I have a lease agreement. I hope I can extend it. But I think by the end of my lease, I'm pretty sure my landlord has the right to say like, oh, I'm not going to extend your lease. You need to get the fuck out. And somebody could look at that and go like, well, that's really immoral. But I mean, well, I signed a lease. I have the ability to go somewhere else. Like it's not immoral. That's the agreement that I made by existing in the society and being part of it here.
And you're right. We need to contextualize it. So you're obvious. You have some money. You're a well-known streamer.
Sure. Well, I'm just saying that like this is the world that I'm operating in. So if you're like operating in a world in 1917 and 1920 where population transfers are happening, people buy land and they move, like there are worse ways to move people off land than the land purchases that the Jews did, where they would buy the land, they'd pay the people, and they'd basically kick them out. There are worse ways to do that, but to say that that was absolutely morally wrong, especially in regards to a people that were part of an empire that forged its own borders through conquest and imperialism, I don't think that holds much water.
Right, and I totally 100% disagree with that because, well, for one, this is one of the problems as a progressive that I have with, and again, I'm a liberal. There's obviously a lot of overlap between the two ideologies. One of the problems that I have with liberalism is that it's so hard to find a seriously foundational, like concrete moral system. And because like what's wrong with the IMF using dollar claims to make foreign countries in Latin America conform to the neoliberal ideology? What's wrong with that? Well, there's nothing legally. It's not illegal. There's nothing like as a liberal you can say what's morally wrong with that. It's just capitalism. It's just making money. It's just people with the power using their power. It's the best thing ever because it promotes XYZ. And it's like, no, at a certain point, you have to be able to say that exploitation is wrong, that even if it's legal, that things that are legal, like colonization, is wrong, even if it has like some positive consequences. There are certain things, and I absolutely insert into this category, if you're going to go to a foreign country, if you're just an individual, if you're me or you, let's say we both have a lot of money, we have a couple $1 million in the bank. If we go to Panama, for example, or Colombia, and we buy as much land as we can, way more land than we could here, and we start to, pay workers super low wages. We start to export all the clothes that we make for starting sweatshops back to America, and we make tons of money, and we pay the workers nothing. That is totally wrong. That's totally wrong. It's it's like taking advantage of a situation.
You can say that that's totally wrong, but the reality is that if there's a country that exists, it's up to that country to establish laws to determine what is right or what is wrong, right? Like I think right. to lean into social contract a little bit, like a lot of these wrongs and rights basically come from how we associate with each other. Like you might say that, well, it would be wrong to buy land and hire workers and do all that. Another country might say, well, we don't have any domestic investment here. FDI is literally the only way that we can ever grow our fucking economy. We do need people to come and build companies here to hire our workers and export products and shit. Other people might not like that. Other people might say, well, fuck you, actually, we're going to tariff the fuck out of you. Or in more extreme examples, in Iran and in Venezuela and other places, they'll say, well, fuck you, actually, we're going to nationalize your companies. We're going to take your shit. Fuck this. We don't want this anymore. We think this is exploitation. It gets complicated, and I agree with you. And I've said this, I've said this a million times, that like when you try to resolve differences between nations, things become very complicated because you're getting appealed to one system of law, and it's hard even to appeal to any common morality, obviously between two, especially ethnically and religiously different nations. You're in like a whole other world. But I mean, like that being said, I think that when you go back to the early 1900s and you go back to the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, like nobody knows what that is going to look like once that empire collapses, right? You've got a few countries that revolt. Turkey forges their borders in war. Other people are kind of happy with the mandate lines that are drawn. Jews buy land in Palestine and they start moving there. The idea that any of these people are like, I don't know if I would say any of these people are acting in a moral wrong. And then to raise our focus on the Jewish part, like you've got people who feel like they've been persecuted throughout the world. The first two Aliyahs all came from I think Eastern Russia, where they were kind of getting destroyed by Russians for a variety of reasons by the secular Russian Empire. When all of this starts happening, and then Jews are like, we really need a place to go. We really need a place to go. Like we feel like we don't have any place to go. And then the Holocaust happens. Like, okay, well, this, like at that point, when 43, 44 rolls around, you're like, wow, we actually really are getting fucking destroyed by Europe. This is insane. Like, if you're a Jewish person and you see that you've got Israel, which is your little strip of land, not what it is today, but what it was in 44, 45, 46, when you see that strip of land, do you feel like these people have some kind of justification or even a moral compulsion, if they care about themselves, their families, or their people, to go to the only land where they think they might be safe and then kind of try to have a country there? Is that like a moral wrong?
This is what makes kind of, I like, look, as people who care about right and wrong, as I hope we both do, you kind of have to say, isn't it right that people, after they were persecuted and after so many people were killed, so many of their people were killed, isn't it right that they have some form of protection? And Benny Morris talks, again, I don't mean to be the guy that's quoting Benny Morris all the time, but Benny Morris talks about this as like, the Jewish people, they saw themselves as and again, this is Benny Morris, not me saying this. They saw themselves as like meek and like they didn't fight back. And now with Zionism, they became this strong entity that they know their rights and they know their own strength. And it's like, yes, of course, like if you face persecution, there should be some form of some form of repayment or whatever. The problem is, well, for one, that has nothing to do with the purchases of land, which is kind of what we were talking about, and what I want to finish on. And two, it doesn't mean that the Palestinians should have to give up their land. So let me just speak first quickly on the actual purchase of land. The whole tangent I've been going on about moral justification and all this kind of stuff, it's all to say that as Americans, you're right, we don't have moral authority over anything really. We can't say that this is right and wrong and then justify it completely and concretely. What we can say though is that as people, like you said, there are certain things that we can all agree on is right or wrong. There's rape, murder, etc. I would try and convince you and convince other people as well to extend that to something like exploitation. And I don't, and obviously exploitation is not really the right word in the case of the Zionists because they just evicted them. But I think that if you're going to extend right and wrong, I think you have to extend it to something like exploitation, like buying land in a foreign country and exploiting workers. And you also have to say that if you're going to buy land legally, evict tenants legally, that's still wrong. It doesn't matter if it's legal or not. That's still wrong.
Yeah, I don't think that it could possibly work that way. That you can say that like evicting somebody from a piece of land is wrong. That hasn't been the way of history of the entire existence of the planet. It wasn't. If that was the case, then Palestinians wouldn't even live in that land at all. Like they are there through the same immorality that you claim they can't be removed from. Like how do you, if you want to go and universalize morals through time, how do you make that argument?
Well, let me just say, and this is one of the reasons why universalizing morals through time, I don't think it's that crazy a thing.
Well, sure, but then I'm asking you, so how can you make an argument, or would you concede then that that Palestinians were colonizers as well?
Well, okay, so this is really important. I don't think that you can make a comparison between these two things, and here's why. Because it's so easy to say, well, Israel is colonizers, well, Palestinians are colonizers too, so who really cares? They're both colonizers, they're both evil, it's both equal. But you can't say that when the colonization of, I mean, if you can even call it that, the immigration or colonization, whatever you want to say, I'll be charitable, and I'll call it colonization, I don't really think that's the right word, like that happened thousands of years ago. Thousands of years going by is not irrelevant. Okay, it's not.
Wait. Hold on. Well, first of all, you're doing a very easy hand wave. Okay, well, morals are universal through time, but not that much time. Also, thousands of years. Ottoman Empire conquered that land in the 1500s. So this is 500 years.
Well, but Levantines, Arabs, and there are other ethnicities, I can't remember them. They lived in Palestine,
So is this something that transcends nations now? Or are we just saying that a particular family or a particular
That's what I'm saying. My whole point is that imperialism in any form, we can say that's wrong. But I'm saying then you can't argue, you can't reasonably argue that 1,000 years of displaced by 1,000 years, let's say 1,000 years ago they colonized the land, you can't say that's irrelevant. And look, let me actually be charitable and say that when people talk about the right of return, in principle, I totally agree with that, and I do think that to some extent it has to happen. But you can't, you really can't kick out Israeli children, just because 75 years ago their great grandparents, did horrible things and kicked out Palestinians, or maybe if they're part of a militia and they terrorized Palestinians until they kicked them out. ultimately it's unfortunate, but you cannot punish the innocent descendants of of, let's just say, for example, of a militiaman who was a horrible person and killed a bunch of Palestinians and terrorized Palestinians. So I actually am consistent on this in that, yes,
well, but then if you're talking about you can't punish people for
the morals, they're different. Of course, the morals are consistent, but it's a very different conversation, and you cannot make an equivalency between the two.
I don't understand why. I'm not saying anybody should be punished. I'm just saying that we would have to admit that the people living there right now are colonizers or descendants of colonizers or imperialists. Right. If we're going to say that Israel and the Jews there now are descendants of imperialists, right? It's all imperialism.
Okay, so let me try and put a bow on this. Okay, so we both agree colonization is just generally not a great thing, right? It's just not.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think that with the way that the world is organized today, I would say that that's definitely not an okay thing. It seemed like that started to change a lot in the early 1900s, that the colonizing stuff didn't work, and probably even prior to that. I mean, obviously with America, it didn't way earlier than that. So, but at least in Africa, yeah.
Okay, so let me say, I believe the colonization is a bad thing. That's kind of the crux. Is that I believe the colonization is bad, and what you're saying is that well, look. Palestinians colonized, Palestinians or the Ottoman Empire colonized this land. So isn't your argument null and void because, well, the Palestinians colonized it and then the Israelis colonized it? What's really the point? And well, there's a few things. One, I actually do believe that 1,000 years is relevant. But secondly, is that the material conditions of Palestine still exist as a direct result of colonization by Israel. And so you could say, well, why is that relevant? Well, if Israel colonized Palestine and then all the Palestinians spread out all over the world, and they went to America, and they went to Australia, and they went to Russia, and everything, we could also, and then 100 years passed. We would all say this is obviously terrible that colonization happened and these people were expelled, but it's unreasonable to say something like a right of return or say that Palestinians should all go back to Israel and that Israelis should all flee.
Wait. So do you acknowledge because that's literally the crux of every big Palestinian push for the Arab Peace Initiative. All of these things have baked into them, all the 5, 6, 7 million refugees going back.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
The reason it's not, let me make what I'm saying clear. The reason it's not is because Palestinians don't live all over the world. They are still under a military occupation in the West Bank. They still don't have equal rights in Israel. And what's happening in Gaza, I mean, I don't even need to explain that. Mowing the lawn. Israel kills thousands of Palestinians every couple of years in order to cull the population.
No, hold on. No, they don't do it to cull the population. That doesn't make any sense because if you look at the population, no culling has happened.
Okay, for now, we can agree to disagree on that because that's not really the point of the conversation.
Sure, okay? I'm just saying that the mowing the lawn thing, I don't even know if that quote is real. I tried to find the source of that quote. It's really hard to find. But even if that quote is real, it's probably more referring to the buildup of tunnels and military arms by Hamas, right? Because that was what 2808 was. That was 2014, and now 2024.
2008 was about that, and 2014
for protective edge. But hold on.
2014 was, it doesn't matter.
Backing up. Okay, so the most Palestinians today don't live in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip, right? I think between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, I think it's less than 5 million. Gaza.
In the West Bank, it's 7 million.
Wait, West Bank. Okay, hold on. Wait, I'm being correct.
2 million live in Israel, and then 7 million live in Gaza and West Bank, I believe.
Okay, 2 million, 4 million. Okay, so there's about it's about the same as assuming the West Bank is 4.1 million and the Gaza Strip is about 2 million. So I think there's about the same amount of refugees outside of Palestine as there are in Palestine, because none of them are resettled. None of the Arab states give them citizenship. All of them are kept in camps, basically, on the borders of Israel until whatever peace agreement gets negotiated. So, I mean, and I don't think any Arab population, the Palestinians for sure, have never conceded any number of refugees getting a right to return to Israel proper. It feels like the only solution for the conflict from the Palestinian side, it seems like the moderates are 67 borders, but people are well, actually, we just want the entire country of Israel. Because
actually, Hamas back in 2000, Hamas has agreed to a two-state solution. And yes, they did. In 2007, they said we will agree to a permanent ceasefire if we get the 67 borders.
I would have to go and look, because on every single deal, I'm not familiar with every deal because Jesus Christ, there's over 100 talks throughout history. But in every single deal where I've gone back and I've read the details of anything that's brought up, the infinite right of return is always baked into it. I've never seen.
Yes, they're different versions of this. And actually, I did want to ask you because I watched your stream a few months ago at the beginning of the conflict, and you said Israel, what they established as state, it was legal, it was fine. Maybe there were some bad things that happened, but ultimately the establishment of the state was fine. And then in the same, like, you know,
Wait. I don't know if I ever say that establishing the state was legal. It was established through war. But go ahead.
Your exact words were legal. And then later, like 5 minutes later, you said all the people who say Palestine will be free from the river to the sea can go jump off a cliff. And so obviously I don't think that that's reasonable, especially since, like, even if you take the least charitable interpretation of Palestine will be free from the river to the sea, which is like the demolition of Israel, it's the exact same thing that Israel tried to do to Palestine.
Well, no, it's not, because like if the roles were reversed, there wouldn't be a Gaza Strip and a West Bank of Israelis. They would just be completely expelled from the land. Number one, and number two, if I did say that, it was either incredibly poorly spoken or it was in a different context. Because to say that this country was made legally when it was made through war, that's a really strange position to take. I would have to go back and listen to.
Maybe it was, and maybe this was just because this was in October and this is before you had done.
Oh, if I said shit back then, I don't know if I might have been.
So I guess then the important thing is to recognize, okay, maybe if Hamas took control, if Hamas took control of Israel, then all the Jewish people would be expelled. I don't even think that's the craziest thing to say, but then it's irrelevant because that's not what's happening. Hamas is in control of Israel. But my whole point, and I think this is the most important point that I can make, is that. What were we talking about? We're talking about Israel colonizing. Is that colonizing is terrible, but nobody's going to say that Native Americans should regain control of the United States. The reason that it's different with Palestine is because of the actual material conditions that the Palestinians live in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in Israel, and the fact that this situation is genuinely unique. So when you make comparisons to Ottoman Empire imperialization, Egypt imperialization of the Arabs and imperializing the Copts or whatever, and like all this kind of stuff, it's not really relevant because it's not like in Egypt the Copts are living under.
Well, that's
Egypt.
true. If you want to say the situation is unique, and I agree with you there, I'm a strong proponent of it is a unique situation theory, but that's not the Palestinian position. The Palestinian position has been to obsessively compare it with other conflicts, especially in Africa, over and over again. Arafat, fancied himself to be similar to the Algerians that kicked the French out, and then eventually they modeled themselves after the apartheid that existed in South Africa. Like, the Palestinians deliberately tried to compare, and all of the appeals to international law and occupying forces and blah blah blah. Like, all of these appeals are things that are done to try to like mirror them onto other conflicts, or to say that like, well, look, there's like a blueprint for how this is supposed to be dealt with. It's like, well, there's not really. It's a pretty unique situation.
Unique situation. No, I agree, but the attempts at mirroring it onto other conflicts. I mean, Israel does the same thing. It's saying that Hamas are Nazis, and this is the modern day that October 7th was the modern day Holocaust. It's like you do that for political purposes, and yes, of course there are similarities between South Africa and Palestine. Both are an apartheid, but like, of course they're not the same situation. And so then, like you have to understand, it has nothing to do with the morality of the situation when you say it's South Africa. Well, it does, but not in the sense that we're talking about of colonization, because they're a unique situation. South Africa is obviously very different than Israel and Palestine. My whole point is that if the exact same situation that the Palestinians had, being expelled from the land, Israel completely taking over and being spread out, and then 100 years past, let's say 3,000 years past, because if that exact situation happened, which is kind of what happened to the Jewish people in Judea or in Palestine or whatever you want to call it, nobody would be arguing for a right of return of Palestinians. And so that, I think, is the most important thing to understand, is that there's a very distinct difference between Jewish people coming back to what they call their homeland and Palestinian people trying to come back to what they call their homeland in Palestine right now. You see what I'm saying?
No, I didn't get that comparison at all.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I did kind of go off on I did kind of pontificate a bit there. So the reason that the colonization of Israel by Zionists is distinctly different, and why we can't make moral comparisons between the two, is because, and I'll explain this by way of example. If the Palestinians were expelled from the land completely right now, and it was terrible, they were expelled all different, tons of people died, they were expelled to all different parts of the world, 3,000 years pass. Nobody would be arguing for Palestinian descendants of the people that were expelled today to return to the land, because 3,000 years have passed. It would be an absurd argument.
Sure, I don't think that's happening with Israel. No.
Yeah, it is.
What?
It's the exact same thing.
No, I don't think so.
That's why the right of return of like Palestinians is a very distinct.
Wait. How is that? What part of this maps onto Israeli history?
Well, Jewish people were expelled from Palestine like thousands of years ago.
Yeah, but they didn't come back because people were like, oh, Israel has a right to go back. They went back because they did extreme amounts of political work. They did extreme amounts of like financial contributions to the British government. They did like, that's how they tried to secure the Balfour Declaration. They got lucky in that the collapse of the Ottoman Empire opened up territory that Britain had a mandate for. They spent a fuck ton of money. They shipped in arms illegally. They organized their, like, it's not like people gave Israel a state. Like, again, that's why I keep saying it was forged in war. Like this country didn't exist because the whole world was like, yeah, you guys definitely deserve this. It was like through a ton of political, financial, and international maneuvering that what happened was eventually able to happen. Nobody granted that.
But I think that's completely missing the point. Because yes, of course, there was tons of political work and tons of strategizing and, you know, illegal this, illegal that, and the Balfour Declaration. But you have to recognize that at the Seventh Zionist Congress, right before Herzl died, they were discussing where do we want the actual land, where do you want the land to be? And there was the territorialist Zionists and there was a Zionist for Zion. And the difference between the two people was massive. Like there was 99.9 or a huge majority were Zionists for Zion. So it wasn't just about persecution. It wasn't just about political activism. It wasn't just working with the British and et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't just about politics. It was about a return to their homeland. And the reason I don't think this is valid.
Well, hold on. It wasn't. It was the other things on the table were kind of shitty too. Like I think it was like Uganda was one place they were considering.
Uganda
like,
was one.
But I think they were evaluating these places. And it wouldn't have worked for a variety of reasons. Like it was just like an untenable place to move to.
Well, so that's true. Is that the British offered Uganda to the Zionists in 1903, and yes, that does sound like a little crazy, like a Jewish homeland in Uganda just doesn't intuitively make sense. But that being said, it still shouldn't have. It still was over. The disagreement wasn't between Uganda and Palestine. That wasn't the disagreement. The disagreement was between any territory and Palestine. And also, you have to acknowledge, like Uganda, it didn't make sense. Palestine definitely didn't make sense. It definitely didn't make sense. And the Zionists knew this. There'd be a huge opposition, but because it was seen as a return to their homeland, they did it anyways.
Oh, I mean, I think if the return to the homeland was the obsession, then I think in 48 you would have seen far more efforts being made to capture the West Bank than just stopping along essentially with the 47 partition line was.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so because David Ben-Gurion, and again, David Ben-Gurion is quoted on this. I can try and find the quote if you want. Like he says, we're going to take anything.
I know, but we're returning to the earlier part of the conversation. Yeah, their goal, Eretz Israel, their goal, Greater Israel, to expand and have like the entire borders. Yeah, that was always like the dream, but again, forced to contend with political realities on the ground, something that Arabs don't seem to understand historically, and Palestinians even today, is that a political reality can shape or define the limits of your aspirations, which I think Israel historically has always been aware of. So regardless of what the aspirations were of a guy who died, in 1904 or 07, whenever Herzl died, regardless of his aspirations, like the country could only do as much as it could because of Arab expansionism, because of the goal for a pan-Arab state, because of Arabs wanting to drive all of the Israelis out of Israel. Do you agree, or do you acknowledge that the only way that Israel could have expanded was through the wars that the Arab countries were always like eager to participate in?
I'll say this. When you say that no Arab countries, the Arab countries have historically been not pragmatic, I think that's totally wrong just because or not pragmatic, but you know what I mean? Like they're really staunch and they don't.
Bad at diplomacy, bad at politics, yes.
Bad at diplomacy. Well, of course we can say that's not true. We've seen Egypt and Saudi Arabia in particular be extremely strategic and not really care about the Palestinian people, not really care about like morality, just caring, like Saudi Arabia especially, just caring about just basically caring about money.
I said historically. I think in the past like 50 years, I think things have changed. But
look, and this actually goes back to Al Husseini, who obviously was very, very, very stubborn when it came to the Jewish state. He said, "There's no way we'll have a Jewish state. We're only going to have like the Palestinian state. That's all we're going to have." And so you're right that yes, this did help Israel justify its cause in the same way that October 7th helped Israel justify its invasion of Gaza. And so, in the same way that, like I said before, the assassination of Abu Nidal helped Israel justify the invasion of Lebanon, like when the PLO responded to.
So do we acknowledge that like the only way that Israel could have expanded its borders as much as it did was on the back of the Arab aggression?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I would agree that. Well, no. I agree that the Arab aggression helped. Well, Arab aggression in certain ways helped. But then
wait. How are we qualifying that so much? In 48, all the states went to war with Israel to try to kick them out, right? In 47, the Palestinians tried to expel the Jews from the pre-Israel place after they refused the partition. In 67, in 56, Nasser closed the straits because he was like the fucking big shit of the fucking world and said that Israel didn't even deserve rights to ship things through there. In 67, all the countries wanted to go to war with Israel and they were engaging in rhetoric to like destroy Israel. In 73, all of them did a surprise attack on Israel. Like, how are we going to say like, well, I guess maybe a little bit, a minor, tiny, itsy bitsy bit might have played. Like, how?
Here's why. It's because well, we've already established that. Well, Egypt certainly doesn't really care about the Palestinian people. They care about land.
Well, it's not about caring about Palestinians. It's about wanting to destroy Israel. Yeah. I don't think any of these people want to care about Palestine. I don't think they've ever cared about Palestinians, to be honest. They just wanted to destroy Israel. But the Palestinians are a useful tool for that. Wait. Do you not agree with that? That's an easy gimme, right? Like
that Egypt has always wanted to destroy Israel?
Yes. For the reign of Nasser, absolutely. Up until Sadat comes in? Yeah, of course. But that's not even controversial. All the Arabs in the surrounding area, if you were to poll the majority of Arabs today, they would probably want Israel to be disbanded as a state. But yeah, especially...
I mean, a lot of people want a one-state solution. But again, you're saying it as if it's not political, as if it's just an opposition to the Israeli state, when in reality it's kind of an opposition to Western hegemony because Egypt was obviously had Soviet Union backing. But again, that's not really the point I'm trying to make. The whole point is
you can make your point. I just want to be clear because the Israeli aggression didn't just come from the 7th Zionist Conference. It didn't just come from Weizmann or Herzl. It always came on the back of extreme Arab aggression, where the Arab aggression goal was to destroy Israel, right? Like if in 67, if Egypt would have captured the Negev, they're never giving the Negev back to Israel. That's not happening, right?
Right. And I think the argument that you could make, you could say, well, let's actually escape morals for a second and say, well, this is all strategic. Like Israel, it's not about the Zionist maximalist mission. It's not about that. It's just about the fact that they were attacked. And yes, you have to acknowledge.
No, hold on, wait. Hold on. It's not just that they were attacked. There are elements. There's two elements. An element is a necessary thing for a thing to exist. Okay. I wouldn't say that the car. I wouldn't say that the bicycle is driving just because it has a front wheel. I would say the bicycle needs both wheels to drive. And then you're going, okay, Destiny, fine. So you're saying that just because it has a front wheel, it can drive. No. It needs both wheels. I'm saying that Zionist expansionist ideology was the rear wheel, but the bike doesn't move without the front wheel, which is an unlimited, unwavering Arab aggression with no political or diplomatic skills attached to it. Both wheels are needed to advance the state forward. That's what I'm saying. Now, and don't just say, okay, yeah, the one was more important than the other. They both are elements of this. Both are necessary elements of this.
Okay, so now I think let me explain why that's irrelevant.
Okay,
is because the whole argument it doesn't pertain to Arab aggression. Okay, so we know that we agree that Arab aggression certainly helped, at least strategically, Israel conquer more territory. We agree on that, right?
What do you mean by at least strategically?
No, strategic meaning at the very least, Israel had more of a justification to conquer.
Is every single expansion of Israeli territory came after Arab existential war? Yes.
Well, that's not true.
What land isn't? What part of that is not true?
Well, we talked about 1967, and also of course
in 67, if the Arab states would have won, do you think that Israel would have continued to exist as a state?
If the Arabs won in 60, well, of course, because Johnson was president then.
The United States, there were no commitments to Israel from the.
Sorry, you're saying that if even with U.S. arms, which obviously after 63 they massively increased, you're saying that if they still lost then.
In 67, if Israel would have lost, yeah, I don't think the state would have.
It's almost okay. Yes, that's hypothetical, but it's almost impossible that Israel would have lost. They had so much financial backing and military.
I don't know how much financial or military backing they had. I know they were buying arms from the U.S. I don't remember if we were.
No. So in 1963, the most amount of military aid that Israel got was like 63 million. Then it jumped up to the very next year when Johnson was president, jumped up to 100 million, and then it just kept on going up basically.
Okay, sure, but keep in mind the populations and the army size and the how many troops you can mobilize. To say that, well, it was impossible that Israel would ever lose the 6-day war. I don't know if you say it's impossible.
Well, it's obviously nothing is possible. But the whole point I'm trying to make, and this will take me less than 20 seconds to make this point. So the whole point I'm trying to make is that, yes, Israel was allowed to conquer more territory because of Arab aggression. Okay, we acknowledge that. Israel also, we know, wanted to conquer more territory anyways because they wanted all of Greater Israel. And my point is that this form of colonization, which is part of the Zionist ideology and exists with or without Arab aggression, whether Arab aggression happened or not.
Well, but that's the thing. We don't know that.
The Zionist, yes, it's relevant. It's relevant. I'll admit that it's relevant. But the Zionist mission to conquer all of Greater Israel and to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. As, yes, the words weren't used, ethnically cleanse, but it was still mentioned that the Arabs had to leave. That is still wrong. That ideology is still problematic.
We don't know,
and
but we don't know. We don't know because we've never had a period where there was not violence or attacks or terrorism or war against Israel to see, well, would they have expanded otherwise?
That's such a terrible argument. That's such a terrible argument because like historically are like people colonizing things or like attacks against Israel, it doesn't justify a problematic ideology. I think you could say
problematic ideology. Hold on, wait. What? We're in the Middle East right now. Everybody has a problematic ideology. The Jewish one is probably the least problematic of all the surrounding states.
Wait, the Jewish one or the Zionist one? Which are you talking about? Because they're different, obviously.
I don't know how different they are, but I'll say the Zionist one, I guess.
Okay, because obviously, we can talk about how violent religions are. Obviously, Judaism is an extremely violent religion, or I shouldn't say extremely. I don't want to like insult.
How
any
is it
religion.
more? Hold on, it's probably one of the least violent of the three religions. Hold on, like was Christianity more or less violent? Even when we look at the Catholic Church of the Middle Ages.
Let me say quickly, I love all people. I love all religions. Nothing is wrong with people being any type of religion. But Judaism, it does have violence in it, of course.
Compared to what? Compared to Christianity and Islam?
Yeah, it's significantly more than both of those, I think.
By
well, if we're just gonna I don't
like if we look at like the Crusades, like what by
I'm
what?
Well, the Crusades are kind of irrelevant because this doesn't have anything to do with like it's not like actual like scripture told Christians to like conquer their territories. It's just like
wait, but then is that how we're evaluating?
And in Islam, I'll admit, yes, there are a lot of problematic ideologies. Okay, there are a lot of problematic things, like especially in the rules of abrogation in Islam, like saying that if you should slay the pagans. I don't agree with that. Or in Judaism, saying that if you like you can treat a non-Jewish person, like you treat a piece of meat. I don't think that's right. Okay,
that's great, but like let's look at. Hold on, you say that you bring that up as an aspect of the religion. 2 million Arabs live in Israel. How many Jewish people live in any other Arab state?
Oh,
like none, like 4,
like 5 or 6. Yeah, like literally 5 or 6. And so obviously that's completely irrelevant because I'm not arguing about the morality of Morocco and their government and how they treat Jewish people. We're talking about Israel and Palestine. And the whole point is that colonization is wrong. Colonization of Zionism is a colonialist ideology. The colonization of Palestine is wrong. And just lastly, what I'll say is the difference between the reason that we shouldn't be focusing on Ottoman Empire colonization of Palestine is because of the Arab colonization of Palestine is because the material effects on the people they colonized are not being seen today. I think that's the most relevant thing is that what are you going to do about the Ottoman Empire colonizing Palestine? Nothing. What are you going to do about Israel colonizing Palestine? Well, there's actually some real ways that we can move this forward and real things that we can do. Right?
I don't know what are the ways. I'm curious. We get this to be our final thing. I just want, but like, what are the ways to move it forward? Because my issue is the reason why I think the history comes up so much is because the history is used to make it intractable, such that there's no way that we can ever. So, what are the realistic paths forward?
I mean, look, obviously, ideally, it would be a one-state solution where everyone has equal rights, and of course, in the solution, you have to have, even though there'd be a Jewish minority, of course, you'd have to have, you can't expel anybody from the land. I think that's wrong, totally wrong. You would have to have basically 50-50 representation for Jewish people and for
if you were Jewish,
that's ideal. That's
sure.
ideal, right? That's just
okay. Well, let's get out of the ideal because we're looking for ways to move it forward. If you were Jewish, would you trust a state where Arabs have majority rule over you?
Well, that's why I just clarified that even though there is a majority of Palestinians in the land, you'd want to have some sort of system where Jewish people have power and they can be represented, right? So that would be how you would ideally organize a government. In terms of trusting a government to like an Arab majority, again, like obviously there's going to be problems, but Israel has complete domination over the West Bank and over Israel proper, obviously, and they have a lot of obviously they have an embargo over God. Like we can talk, that's a different thing, but obviously the status quo right now is not really feasible. It's not really
Sure, I understand, but again, to circle, what is an answer going forward? Like, what is the path towards?
Well, okay, so you asked me what I think the path forward was. I gave you my ideal answer. I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Do we have any kind of practical answer, or?
Well, the best thing that we can hope for is a two-state solution, and some sort of obviously the abolishment of the settlements. I don't think that's controversial at all. All the settlers should go back to Israel. Again, I don't think it's controversial. I think that the settlements are is a horrifying, unhumanitarian, illegal international law thing, and so they should go back to Israel, and then the Palestinian Authority should have. Palestinian Authority versus Hamas is it's a big conversation that we can't get into right now. But yeah, the Palestinians should have complete sovereignty over their land, and also there should be the two lands, the Gaza and the West Bank, should be connected. I actually think that the best solution would probably be Gaza and the West Bank are connected fully. But again, how practical is that? It's probably not.
Sure, and I mean, like that sounds okay, but man, that's a really generous offer to people that were involved in like multiple wars that were trying to take the entire country. It's pretty hard to go back to like, I'm going to beat you up and take all your shit, but then if I fail, well, can we go back to what you were offering me before I tried to beat you up and take all your shit?
Are you talking about Israel or Hamas?
I'm saying that between Israel and Palestine, that you had your partition plan, essentially your 47 stuff. People said no, and then they fought for the 48 war. And then after that, you had your 67 war, and they were like, okay, well, this is bullshit. You can't take territory in war. Then you had like your 73 war, and then you've got like Hamas, you've got Hezbollah, and you've got all this fighting. And every time there's like an intifada or another terrorist attack or another Iranian proxy, there's some attack. People are like, okay, well, let's go back to the 67 borders before 67. Let's keep going back to before 67. It's like, okay, well, you can't go back to that deal. You walked away from that. You walked away from the 47 partition plan. So I don't know how we can go back to that when you tried to take everything over and over again and failed. Because I think we both acknowledge, I think, if any state on any of the Israeli border would have conquered any Israeli territory, Israel's never getting that land back, ever. That wouldn't even be controversial to say. Of course not. It's not their land by right. So it just seems weird to fight a war over and over again, trying to expel an entire people, lose the war, and then cry to the international community saying, can you please come and like make them give us our shit because we lost our wars of annihilation.
Right, but now you're making this is. I know you're not saying this. You're not trying to say this, but this is kind of a form of collective punishment, and that like entire people's population should be culpable for their government's actions, which I don't think is right. So when Hamas does an action, I don't think Palestinians should be held responsible for that action. And so when in 1973, which is obviously, this is 50 years ago or whatever, when Egypt and a coalition of Arab countries invade Israel, I don't think the Palestinians should be held responsible for that action. And so, yes, it is, you can say them being naive, you can say them being an idealist, but it really shouldn't, in a moral setting, in a moral sense, it really shouldn't matter. And
sure. Do you think that Arab states should start issuing passports and citizenships to Palestinians living in their borders instead of like their perpetual unending refugee problem?
No, I mean, come on. That's ridiculous. You know that the big reason that Egypt and like other Arab countries haven't allowed refugees in is because if you start letting refugees in, well, all of a sudden the Palestinian state will cease to exist.
Exactly.
Right?
So hold on. Wait, so careful. You're making an argument for collective punishment on the other side then. You're saying, well, hold on, because it's at the end of the day, it's not about the refugees. It's not about the people. It's not about the humanitarian issue, which is what you guys keep saying it's about. It's actually about the political aim of achieving the state of Palestine. I feel like you just said the quiet part out loud. The idea that we have to deprive these people of homes or food or education because we need them to stay refugees so that we can keep fighting Israel, so we can keep having the political aspiration of creating the state of Palestine, that's super anti-humanitarian.
You also recognize that I am not a fan of Egypt. I'm not a fan of Iran. I'm not a fan of...
It's not about being a fan of Egypt or Iran. It's that UNRWA, it's that the definition, the Palestinian refugees have a unique status in the world where they are kept as refugees indefinitely. No other group of people has had that sort of political weaponization of their humanitarian problems.
No, you're not wrong, but then again, I'm not a fan. Let me just say this: I'm not a fan of Egypt. I'm not a fan of Iran. I don't think that what they've done is sufficient for the Palestinian people. But then you also have to acknowledge that what they're doing is very politically motivated. I don't necessarily think it's right. But if any group bears the responsibility of Palestinian refugees, why the hell is it Iran? Right? That doesn't make any sense. Why is it Qatar? Wait,
hold on. Because worldwide, we all bear responsibilities for refugees. All of us have a duty.
Yes. I totally agree.
But these states, there are special conditions where these states do not. They will keep Palestinian refugees in their country, and they will not give them citizenship. They explicitly are not allowed to issue passports. UNRWA does not resettle Palestinian refugees. They're kept there so they can continue to grow as a population, to continue applying political pressure on Israel. So we can say every year, there's 5 million refugees, there's 6 million refugees, there's 7 million refugees. Most of these refugees have never lived in Palestine in their entire lives. A lot of their parents haven't even.
Okay. The reason that they do this, again, the action they should be taking is explicitly against Israel, trying to make sure that the horrible things that are happening in Gaza right now stop. That is what they should be doing. Taking refugees, obviously that would be, it would be great because the refugees themselves would have a place to live and a place to stay, and that would be amazing. But it should be the aggressor that takes responsibility for these refugees. And again, of course, we can say, well, Egypt, they're terrible because they don't take any Palestinian refugees.
Well, hold on, wait. When you say it should be the aggressors that take responsibility for the refugees, the aggressors in 47 were the Arabs. The aggressors in 48 were the Arab states. The aggressors in 56 and 67 and 73 were arguably all the Arabs. So, I mean, and that was where a lot of the refugee situation was created from. And then when you look at Jewish refugees, well, who took responsibility for that? When Jews fled Iraq or every single Arab country, when Jews were expelled from the West Bank by Jordan, when Jews were expelled from the Gaza Strip, when Jews were expelled from every other Arab state, it's not like the Arab states paid money for the Jews that left. Israel took all those refugees in.
Can I say, and I'm not saying this to be a dick. I do want to know, because I've been looking for this. Where does it say that Jewish people were expelled from Arab countries?
In certain countries there was more violence than not. So I think Iraq was a country where there was violence. There are different pogroms that happened after. I don't remember in which country specifically. I have to go look them up. But after every major Arab-Israeli war, there were push and pull factors where Jews started to get treated differently, or there were pogroms against Jews in Arab majority states in response to the victories in 48 and 56 and 67. So a lot of Jews fled the different Arab states and they all went to Israel. If you're going to make the argument that there were only pull factors and there were no push factors, I could try and find specific instances, but I'm pretty sure they're well known. I think in Baghdad, I think in Iraq, that was some of the most well known pogroms, but.
No, I'm not saying that because I'm denying that Jews were expelled from Arab countries. But in doing research on this specific topic, I wasn't able to find much evidence for that. So, but anyways, that was an aside. Mm-hmm. We were talking about why expulsion. I'm
just saying it's unfair to the Palestinians from a humanitarian perspective.
I said that they were the aggressor. And what I mean by that is, well, was Israel the aggressor on October 7th? Obviously not. But I think that they are responsible for the conditions of Palestinians. I don't think that's super...
If anything, wouldn't it be the British that are responsible if they were the ones that mandated the territory and they allowed the Jews to move in?
Well, okay, you could say that it's a Western hegemonic force. I mean, sure, the British were responsible partially, but right now it's Israel. We say now, but the conditions that exist right now weren't just, this is what we said at the very beginning of the conversation, where people pretend it was just Israel versus the Palestinians for 80 years, in which case, damn, that's horrible. But it wasn't. The Palestinians are just the last faction of the strong Arab resistance against Israel, I guess absent Iran and maybe Syria now, or basically Iran now. But... So then I think you have to understand, this kind of goes back to the beginning of the conversation, is that, a lot of people in the Israeli government just do not think that, they don't consider Arabs real people, especially people.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. If that's true, how 2 million Arabs live in Israel that enjoy more or less the same rights as Jewish Israeli people do? So to say that they don't see Arabs as real people is crazy, especially when Arabs believe insane shit on average about Jewish people. So I think that the reverse of that is way more true than Israelis seeing Arabs as not people.
Well, we've already acknowledged. Okay. So when you bring up the point 2 million Arabs live in Israel and they have equal rights, I think it's so frustrating because they really don't. They don't have equal representation in the Knesset. They don't have equal rights. Do you know what the Admissions Committee law is? I'm sure that's kind of a popular...
No, but they do have... How do they not have equal rights? And they have members in the Knesset. Listen to what you're saying. They've got members in parliament.
Yes, they have members in parliament. They have a member in this... There's a Muslim member, an Arab Muslim in the Supreme Court. But then if you're going to make that argument, that Arabs have equal rights, you also have to actually dive into the actual facts, which is that they're extremely disproportionately underrepresented.
Facts. Hold on, no. The underlying facts are separate from the rights guaranteed to you. In the United States of America, more or less, everybody has the same rights guaranteed to them, but that doesn't mean that factually everybody, every ethnic group, every geography lives the same.
Well, that's true, and that's relevant. But we're talking about represent. Well, okay, so
if you want to argue that they don't have equal representation, they don't have the proportionate representation of the Knesset, I probably agree with you. That's probably true, but that's a lot different than saying. Yeah. And then also, whatever comparison we're making here, like, it's way worse on the Arab side. Do you acknowledge that Arabs have a way worse view of Israelis or Jews than Jews have of Arabs?
Well, okay, let me expand on that. Right now in Palestine, it's probably true, but that's only because of the colonization of their land. I think this is reasonable, that if Catholics did exactly what Israel did in Palestine, then there would be an extremely anti-Catholic sentiment, right? Or if
that's
Chinese
fine. We can talk about why it exists. Maybe there's, but it does exist. That Arabs in general have a horribly negative view of Jewish people.
Right, and if you have to understand that Israel gets its money from America. They have to uphold some semblance of Western values. You have to
wait. Israel founded itself on Western values. Israel founded itself as a European-style democracy. That was their goal from the very beginning. That's just because they got money from America.
They were kind of like a weird hybrid of socialism, communism, and Western democracy. Their founding was kind of like, we're trying to be a Western bulwark in the Middle East, but it was also economically it was obviously socialist, and then ideologically it was supposed to be this like utopian like socialist dreamland. So they but you're right. It was founded on Western value. It was founded on Western values. We can kind of say that as a generalization, but they know that the only way that they will truly be seen as a substantial force of Western hegemony in the Middle East is if they have some semblance of liberal values. And so credit to them when they actually do uphold those Western values with things like granting Arabs equal rights and letting them have votes and letting them be represented in Congress. Okay, let's give credit where credit is due, I guess. But then you also have to acknowledge, well, they don't actually have equal rights, and this is a very real thing. And so, of course, you can say, well, stop and frisk, that applies to everyone. No, you have to be realistic and say, no, of course it's going to disproportionately be used against Arabs. The admissions committee law is probably the best example, where you have committees in neighborhoods, in Arab neighborhoods as well, but in Arab neighborhoods as well, and also in Jewish neighborhoods, where you have committees that screen applicants to live in that neighborhood. And if they don't like the applicant, then they don't let them live there. And so you could say, well, couldn't that be used against Jewish people as well? Well, of course it could. But if it was used against Jewish people in the same way it's used against Arab people, then it wouldn't against Arabs living in Israel. Then it wouldn't be a law. Okay, it's a law because it benefits Jewish people in Israel as opposed to Palestinian Arabs in Israel. And so this is like super relevant. And
hold on, wait, what is this law called?
It's called the admissions committee law.
Do you think that the goal of this is to just be like discriminatory, or is the goal of this to like maintain some kind of like harmony in neighborhoods so people don't like move and like stir shit up, like Jews moving to Arab majority neighborhoods or Israelis moving to Jews moving to Arab places, Arabs moving to Jewish places? Like, what is the goal? What is the point of this law?
Well, I'm sure the point of like what they say on the surface is probably something like, oh yeah, we want to ensure harmony or something like that, or we don't want people in nice neighborhoods to have to deal with, I don't know, people they don't like living in the neighborhoods. I don't know what the justification is. It doesn't really matter because the actual consequences of the law are seriously discriminatory.
Well, it's pretty. The root of the law is pretty important. Listen, I haven't looked into this much. Even if I grant you this full thing, though, like, it doesn't, I don't think it substantively changes anything that was said earlier. Like, I think the Arab countries still, in whole, have a massively worse view of Jews than Jews have of Arabs. Like, it's not even close.
This is why, let me tell you why I think this is relevant, because we can talk about all these facts and these statistics and everything and just like, what is the actual relevance to this conversation? The relevance is that if you view like Zionism like I do, which is ultimately a colonialist ideology, I think it's relevant to say that when you colonize a land, hatred of people is always wrong, but you know, a dislike of a colonizing people is more justified, still wrong, but more justified than a hatred of the people you're colonizing.
Okay, so, wait, again, do you acknowledge that Islam is a colonizing ideology?
No. Well, no, I wouldn't.
Founded by Muhammad the warlord, caliphites that have been started in the name of Islam, multiple terror groups that all cite Islamic verses. Like, you wouldn't say that Islam is a colonial or imperialist type of.
I don't usually. So there are, like, obviously Islamic countries have colonized countries. Christian countries are doing the same thing. Jewish countries are doing the same thing. Okay.
Wait, but like the source of like the source of fighting stems pretty uniquely though in Islam, right? Like is there a Christian or Jewish equivalent to jihad, or like a caliphate that you can find in like the Torah or the?
Actually, I actually do think that, I'm going to be honest, I think that Christianity is probably the best religion. I mean, I'm a Christian, obviously, so I'm biased. But Islam and Judaism and Christianity, there are both references to there are all justifications of violence. I mean, look, in Judaism...
Not justification. Hold on, you're shifting a lot. I'm not talking about justifications for violence. I'm talking about like conquering territory in the name of your religion.
Well, usually, you I mean, I think people would say that like a justification for violence in a religious text is seen as justification for conquering like infidels or conquering like not like.
And I would say that Islam is pretty uniquely in that like their government structure and that is like baked into their religion probably way more than Christianity or Judaism.
Well, okay, so all I'll say about that is that the whole idea of conquering non-Muslim countries and forcing them to convert and everything. There's this great Islamic scholar, Motaz al-Khatib, which I'd recommend to anyone check out, that argues that especially the Islamic fundamentalist interpretation of global jihad is completely warped. And also, obviously, like, yes, there is the idea.
Wait, hold on. I don't care what a minority guy. There's also sects of Jews that think that moving into Israel is actually unethical because you're not supposed to move there until the end times, right? There's plenty of Jewish people in the United States. Well, plenty. It's a minority sect, but like, I'm sure you can find like rabbis or imams or whatever the fuck that will say a particular thing, but like baked into the religious text, what is the Christian or Jewish equivalent to like a caliphate? Or what is the Christian or Jewish equivalent to like, to like having the like interweaving so tightly the religion with the state, right? Jesus said, "Render unto Caesar." Muhammad would never say that. He'd say, we're all the same shit. It's like the religion and the state combined.
Yes, and so there is like this desire for a global caliphate under. No.
Hold on, you're loading this so much. You're saying desire for. It's not a desire. It's in the text. It's baked into the religion. It's not like it'd be nice, an afterthought.
Give me some credit. I'm saying yes. In Islam, there's this whole thing, but and again, look. Of course, I'm not an expert, but I've just been reading this book on jihad, and it says that. Well, it's like in international law, as a Muslim country, as an Islamic country, you are required to follow international law to treat other countries like according to diplomatic rules. And so yes, if you're going to say like, well, in Islam it's baked into the ideology that they want a global caliphate. Okay, well, we can get into hermeneutics and interpretations of Islamic texts and the hadith and everything. But then we can also say that, well, it's also part of Islam that that international law should be respected, that diplomatic law should be respected. And so let's just at least be charitable. And also, I'm not in the business of condemning any religion, which is why when I said Judaism is a violent religion, I took it back immediately and said, no, Judaism is not a violent religion. There are violent things said in like the Talmud and the Torah.
Yeah, but that's hold on, wait. But that's
to think about why it's relevant.
Wait. To this. That's bullshit though, because we've conveniently, because would you condemn Zionism?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so it's not fair because we found a way to extract all the Jewish stuff from Judaism that we don't like, and then we call it Zionism, but we won't condemn like Islam because we don't have a formal name for Sharia or a formal name for caliphites or a formal name for jihad. So like, well, that's just the religion. We can't criticize that. But for Judaism, we've extracted all of it into Zionism. We have like a central thing that we can hate about that religion. How does that make sense?
Yes, that's the thing. I'm not going to condemn Judaism, even though there are a lot of things I disagree with in Judaism. I'm not going to condemn Christianity. I mean, even though there are certain things I disagree with in Christianity. And I'm not going to condemn Islam either. If you were to tell me, let's actually take a look, this is a specific thing that's said in the hadith, do you disagree with it or not? It would be very easy. Of course I disagree with that. Of course I condemn it if it's saying we should kill all the pagans. But then you have to understand, how does this reflect the conflict? How is this relevant? And it's like global jihad has nothing to do with
careful with what you're going to say, because global jihad is literally what Hamas calls for in its charter. They're a theocratic Islamist entity. They literally call for global jihad. That's what they do. They want every Muslim to show up and fight against Israel.
Who'd you say, Hamas?
Hamas literally is, it's an Islamist Sunni group. They call for jihad, to come and fight against.
Up until 1987, the major forces, Al-Husseini included, obviously the PLO, Yasser Arafat, they were all secular and nationalist organizations. And then Hamas came along, and yes, this is partially due to an increased popularity of funding and an ability of an Islamic fundamentalist group to come about. And yes, of course, like we can say like Hamas's ideology we don't agree with, but if you're going to look at the whole history of the ideology of Zionism and the whole history of the region, Hamas came in the 70s and then really formally existed in 1987. Why is Islamic Jihad going to be relevant to the opposition to an Israeli state when the opposition to the Israeli state started in the 1900s?
Well, I'm saying that right now, because right now for the conflict, it is relevant. And it's just interesting to point to Judaism as being, or Zionism, I guess, as being like inherently, because the statement that I'm responding to is you said earlier that Judaism is like the most violent of the three religions, that's just a very interesting statement to me. But like, I think Jews are like the only people that don't try to convert other people. Christians and Muslims are crazy about it. And then obviously the Catholic Church as an institution was involved in so much throughout all of Europe, militarily. And then for Islam, you literally have your caliphites. You've got like Muhammad was a warlord. Like the state and the religion are intertwined with each other. That's why you have so many theocratic, dictatorships that stem from Islam. So it's just it's weird to say that Judaism is like the most violent of those three religions when it seems to be the most like they literally got kicked out of their fucking homeland. They're like, well, fuck it, we'll just chill.
Well, so again, and I'll make this argument a lot, is that a lot of times people who are Muslim, people who are Jewish, people who are Christian, obviously we know this, a lot of times they don't like follow the tenets of their religion by the book, like 100%, obviously. And so again, like when I said Judaism is like the most violent religion, I really don't want to get into the business of just condemning one certain religion. What I will say is that the references to violence and references like endorsing violence occur more in I think the order is Judaism, Islam, Christianity, or something like that. And I can show you the study. Again, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because I have a problem not with Judaism, with Zionism. I don't have a problem with Islam. I have a problem with like Islamic fundamentalism. But even then, you have to acknowledge that if you're going to cite Islam as the reason for the opposition to a Jewish state, it does not make sense.
Sure, I didn't do that. I'm only responding to your statement that Judaism was like the most violent religion, which I think is.
And I don't really, guys, do not cancel me. I don't think that Judaism is like super violent or anything. I just say there is references to violence in Judaism, and it's more so than in Islam. Again, I don't think that should be super relevant to the conversation. But I also don't like when people slander Islam as this like ultra violent religion that is horrible. It's like the references to violence there's a study on this, and I can hold on.
Wait, we're playing so many games. References to violence don't matter. No one cares. We're not talking about references to violence. We're talking about like what is the ideal practice, and then what does the realistic practicing of a particular religion look like? And it's not
just like talking about violence. It's like justifying violence. Again, I don't want to get into this conversation because I don't think it's relevant, right? Because the whole argument is like Islam is endorsing a global caliphate, therefore this is relevant throughout the whole conflict, and I don't think that's true. I think the focus has to be on the ideology that endorses colonization, and the opposition to that is reactionary and political. It's not religious.
I don't know if I agree, but we don't have to keep looping on this. Okay, well, do you think that, are you reflecting negatively on Catholicism and Christianity's peacefulness when you say that people should make death threats against me?
What? No, if you guys don't make death threats, don't do death threats.
Okay, because you said that one guy on Twitter was kind of based when he was talking about murdering slave owners so I wouldn't exist or whatever.
Did you saw that? No, that was a joke. I don't actually agree with that, obviously. Okay. But I'm glad that you actually looked at my Twitter. But no, obviously that was tongue in cheek. I think he said everything in the quote tweet the thing that I quote tweeted was bleeped out, so I didn't actually know what he said. Somebody has said, "Oh, he wants to murder Destiny." I was like, "Oh, kind of base," but no, I don't actually think that anybody should murder you. Obviously.
Wow, thanks. Okay.
You're welcome. I got you, man. I got you. I'll look out for you. But yeah, that's it. I guess like I'm satisfied with that.
Yeah. Well. Hey, thanks for the conversation. Have fun. Be careful. Stay safe.
Oh, good. Wait, can I just say right before you left? What did you go to music school?
Yes.
Which one?
Nothing. You said you're in California?
I'm in California, but I went to music school in New York.
Where?
Manhattan School of Music.
Oh, okay. Sorry. The two big ones I obviously know of Berkeley and Juilliard. It's UNO in Nebraska, just like a random fucking state school. So.
Wait, what is it? University of
Nebraska in Omaha.
In Omaha, okay. Yeah, because my trajectory is somewhat similar to yours in that I was a music major in New York, and then I kind of went out here and trying to do politics. By the way, follow my Instagram, Aiden.Doyle with 3 E's.
Wow. Okay. Well, hey, thanks for the conversation, man.
Sorry, I didn't ask if I could plug myself. But,
you're good. Go for it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, man. hopefully we can talk again at some point in the future.
Yeah. Have fun. Be careful. Bye.
All right. See ya.
Jesus Christ. That guy knew more than most people. The unsatisfying part of there, I guess, was just drilling down into usually we have to get into the philosophy when a person doesn't have any of the factual understanding. He had a lot of factual understanding, but then the philosophy was really weird there, I thought. But okay.